Hi everyone, I'm Emily. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a day to feel thankful and spend time with family, but for me, it became one of the hardest days I've ever been through. I'm a senior in high school, and I love architecture and design. This year was important for me because I was working toward my future, but things at home have been different ever since my mom passed away and my dad remarried. Now, my stepmom Susan lives with us, along with her 2 kids. It's been tough, with lots of mixed emotions. My dad tries to keep the peace, which makes it hard for me to talk to him about anything related to Susan. She always finds a way to make everything about her and her kids, and I often feel left out, like I don't belong in my own home. As Thanksgiving got closer, the house was busy with preparations. We were expecting a lot of people, extended family, my dad's close friends, and even some of Susan's friends. Even though I was nervous, I was excited about one thing: my college acceptance letter. I had gotten into one of the best architecture schools in the country, and I planned to surprise everyone by announcing it during dinner. The house smelled amazing, with roasted turkey and pies baking. Everyone gathered around the dining table, chatting and laughing, and for a moment, I felt a little less anxious. I looked around at my cousins talking, my dad telling jokes, and Susan acting like the perfect hostess. When dessert came out, I knew it was my chance. My heart was racing, but I stood up and tapped my glass to get everyone's attention. I have some great news, I said, trying to stay calm. I've been accepted into the architecture program at. But before I could finish, Susan interrupted me. She spoke in a light tone, but her words were hurtful. Oh, Emily, always dreaming. Let's focus on what really matters, okay? Everyone at the table looked confused, but Susan didn't stop there. She reached across the table, grabbed my acceptance letter out of my hand, and tore it into pieces. The pieces fell like sad little bits of confetti. "This is what I think of your so-called achievement," she said. "It's trash, just like your unrealistic dreams." The room went completely silent, and the air was thick with shock. I stood there, pieces of my acceptance letter scattered on the floor, feeling like my heart had broken just as much. I looked around, hoping someone would stand up for me or say something, but there was only silence, followed by murmurs and awkward looks. My dad, caught between his wife and me, said nothing. With tears in my eyes, I excused myself from the table, the sound of Susan's mocking laughter ringing in my ears as I ran to my room. That night, I realized how truly alone I felt in that house. I came to understand the painful truth that family isn't just about being related by blood, it's about the love and support they choose to give or withhold. This Thanksgiving, I didn't feel grateful. Instead, I was filled with a determination to prove Susan wrong and to reclaim my dreams, no matter what it took. After Thanksgiving, the house was filled with chaos and disbelief. Guests quickly left, whispering as they hurried out. The house felt colder and emptier than ever. In the quiet that followed, I couldn't stop crying. My dad, clearly conflicted, avoided looking at me. His silence confirmed my worst fear. He wasn't going to stand up to Susan, even after everything. Feeling desperate, I called my uncle, who had always been supportive. He picked up right away, and as I told him what had happened, his comforting words gave me a small bit of hope. "We'll figure this out, Emily. This isn't the end of your dreams," he reassured me. The next morning, following my uncle's advice, I met my best friend Alex for coffee at a busy cafe. We came up with a plan. "We need evidence," Alex said, determined. "We need to show your dad who Susan really is, not just because of the college letter, but for all the times she's mistreated you and your step-siblings." Our first step was clear. We needed to confirm my college acceptance. I reached out to the admissions office, explained what had happened, and they were understanding. They promised to send a new letter and an email confirmation. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Alex and I quietly started gathering information from people who knew Susan, former friends, colleagues, and anyone who had experienced her manipulative behavior. The stories we collected were eye-opening. Each one revealed more about Susan's true character. She had sabotaged a step-sibling's job application and even isolated my dad from his old friends. As we pieced everything together, the real Susan became clear, a person who was far more controlling and harmful than I had realized. Susan, perhaps feeling untouchable, began pushing her limits even more. She made big purchases without asking my dad, and her behavior at some of his business events upset important contacts. Her arrogance was affecting not just our family life, but also my dad's professional world. One evening, as I was going through all the evidence we had gathered, my uncle called. "It's time," he said. "Your dad needs to see this before Susan causes more harm." Armed with a folder of proof, including emails from the college and testimonies from people who had been affected by Susan. I approached my dad. He looked tired, like a shadow of the lively person he used to be. "Dad," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking, "I need you to see something important." As he read through the documents, listened to the recordings, and saw the confirmation of my college acceptance, I could see his emotions shift. He looked sad, but also like he was realizing something big. It was clear that he now had a tough decision to make. Susan had been controlling our lives from behind a mask, pretending to care while secretly manipulating everything. Finally, my dad spoke, his words heavy with meaning. "We need to talk, Emily," he said. "We need to talk about Susan." The plan was set for a Sunday afternoon. We made it seem like a casual family gathering, but it had a serious purpose. This was the day I intended to reveal the truth about Susan, not just to my dad, but to everyone who needed to know. We invited a few key people, those who had dealt with Susan and had their own stories to share. My uncle helped organize everything, making sure everyone understood how important this day would be. It was time to bring the truth to light. As we prepared the living room for our guests, my uncle reminded me to stay calm. When people started arriving, the atmosphere was filled with tension and anticipation. Susan greeted everyone with her usual charm, completely unaware of what was about to happen. My dad, sensing something was up, stayed quiet, giving me a questioning look. Once everyone was seated, I stood up. My hands were shaking slightly, but my voice was strong. "Thank you all for coming today," I began. "I know this seems like a regular gathering, but it's important. It's about my future, and the future of our family." I glanced at my dad, who nodded for me to continue. "This isn't easy, but it's necessary. Many of you have had experiences with Susan that were less than positive, and today we are bringing those to light, not out of spite, but to find the truth." I turned to Mrs. Johnson, a former colleague of Susan's. She shared how Susan had undermined her work project, leading to her unfair demotion. After she spoke, others began to share their stories. Mr. Thompson, our neighbor, talked about a community event that Susan ruined by interfering. With each story, the picture of Susan's manipulative behavior became clearer. Susan's face grew pale, and her usual calm demeanor began to slip as more people spoke. My dad's expression darkened with each new revelation, as he started to piece together the truth he had been avoiding. When it was my turn, I held up my shredded college acceptance letter, now taped back together, a symbol of what Susan had done. "This was my college acceptance letter, which Susan tore up on Thanksgiving," I said. "It should have been a night of celebration, but it turned into one of the worst nights of my life." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of what had happened. My dad, who had been quietly listening the entire time, finally stood up. His usual indecision was gone, replaced with determination. "I can't ignore this any longer," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Susan, these actions cannot be part of this family." Susan tried to defend herself, making excuses and denying everything, but the evidence was too strong. Her true nature had been revealed, and there was no way for her to hide anymore. As the gathering came to an end and the guests began to leave, my dad stopped me at the door. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said, his eyes filled with regret. "I should have seen this sooner. We'll fix this. We'll make things right." That day marked a turning point. It was the beginning of the end of Susan's control over our lives and the start of a new chapter, one led by truth and integrity. After that day, the fallout for Susan was fast and severe. Word of her actions spread quickly through the community, and her carefully built image fell apart. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves from her, not wanting to be associated with her manipulative behavior. Even her social media profiles became ghost towns, reflecting how isolated she had become in real life. The effects of Susan's behavior didn't just hurt her socially, they also impacted her financially. With her reputation ruined, she found herself isolated from the social circles she once ruled. She lost business opportunities, and the financial strain began to show. Her once carefully controlled world turned into a place of uncertainty and rejection. Meanwhile, with my dad's support, I was able to focus on my future. He helped me reapply to the architecture school, and this time I not only got accepted but also received a scholarship. The pride in his eyes as he handed me the acceptance letter made my heart swell. It was a moment of redemption and a new bond between us. When I moved to campus early, I fully immersed myself in my studies. The college environment was so different from the suffocating atmosphere back home. Here, I wasn't just the girl from a troubled family, I was Emily, the aspiring architect. I thrived in my classes, with my designs praised for their creativity and attention to the environment. The freedom to express myself and be appreciated for my talent was amazing. Back home, my dad decided to file for divorce from Susan. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary for our family to heal. He shared updates with me during our weekly calls, and each conversation felt like a step toward healing the emotional wounds Susan had left behind. A key moment of my new beginning came one sunny afternoon at a cafe near campus. I was surrounded by new friends, chatting with my dad and uncle over video call. I opened another letter from my college, this time inviting me to an exclusive architectural workshop in Europe because of my potential and achievements. As I read the letter aloud, my friends cheered, and my dad and uncle proudly congratulated me. It was a moment of pure joy, showing just how far I had come. My journey, from betrayal to success, was not just about achieving academic or personal victories. It was about taking back control of my life and my identity, which Susan had tried to twist and ruin. This chapter of my life closed with the promise of new adventures, learning, and growth, all built on a foundation of truth, resilience, and the unwavering support of those who truly cared about me. As the sun set over the cafe that day, I realized that the best way to overcome everything wasn't just to survive, it was to thrive. I had proven that no one could stop me from reaching my dreams. That's the end of my story, and I've triumphed over the challenges that were thrown at me. Now, here's a question for you. Do you believe it's always possible to turn personal betrayal into a stepping stone to success? Or are some wounds too deep to heal from? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey of resilience and redemption, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Your support helps us keep sharing these kinds of narratives. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing your responses.
When I was growing up, I always felt like I was different from my family. My name is Jenny, and my family has a long history of owning restaurants. My dad, Joe, is a big and loud man who runs our family restaurant very strictly. My mom, Linda, is always busy managing the staff. Then there's my older brother, Mike. He's seen as the perfect one to take over the business. I remember one night at dinner, the smell of Dad's famous roast filled the air. Mom was excited about a new recipe they were trying. She asked me if I'd like it because it had a fancy herb I enjoyed. I mumbled my answer while picking at my food. Mike laughed and said, "Who cares about herbs? The real excitement is the new grill Dad's getting for the restaurant." Dad nodded, looking at me, and asked when I'd start showing interest in the restaurant. I felt small and unsure, saying I liked being outside with plants and stuff. Mom and Dad didn't understand. They thought I needed a real job to fall back on. I'd always felt a knot in my stomach during these conversations. But there was one person who understood me, Grandma Rose. She lived in a small house with a beautiful garden. She was gentle and patient, unlike my parents. I'd often went to her house to escape the talk of the restaurant. One day, I found her in the garden, and she asked me to help plant tulips. I asked her why Mom and Dad didn't understand my love for plants. Grandma Rose looked at me with her wise eyes and said that my parents just wanted what's best for me. But they don't see the world like we do. There's magic in these plants in the earth. It's okay to be different. Grandma Rose's words resonated with me. Even as the pressure from my family grew, I clung to her wisdom. Mike, my brother, often teased me, calling me the gardener in a mocking way. His friends would laugh along. But I just brushed it off. They didn't understand the beauty I saw in every leaf, the peace in the morning dew. But I did, and when my hands were in the soil, I felt like I belonged. High school graduation felt like a crossroads. While my family buzzed with excitement over Mike joining Dad at the restaurant, I felt like a spectator in my own life. One evening, as we gathered in the living room, Dad talked enthusiastically about expanding the restaurant. He praised Mike for his upcoming role. Feeling invisible, I fiddled with a loose thread on the couch until Mom's sharp voice snapped me back. "What about you, Jenny? Ready to step up?" she asked, suggesting I work at the restaurant. It was now or never. "Actually, I'm not going to work at the restaurant. I'm going to study landscape design," I said, barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. Dad's face turned red with anger. "Landscape what now?" he barked, dismissing it as no career for me. Mike sneered, suggesting I just plant flowers for a living. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but I stood my ground. Yes, actually. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm good at it, and I love it, I declared. Mom looked confused and worried, urging me to be sensible. But I felt a surge of defiance. It's not just playing in the dirt, Mom. It's creating something beautiful, something real. I'm not asking for your approval. But I am telling you, this is my decision, I asserted firmly. Dad slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming with anger. If you choose this foolishness, you're on your own. Don't expect any help from us, he warned. I felt a knot in my stomach, but my voice remained steady. Fine, I'll do it on my own. Grandma Rose, who had been quietly knitting in the corner, finally spoke up. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Joe, let the girl follow her heart. She's got a gift, and it would be a sin to waste it, she said, her eyes fixed on Dad. Dad let out a frustrated grunt, turning away. Fine, do what you want. But don't come crying to us when it all falls apart, he muttered. As I turned to leave the room, my heart pounding, Mike called out after me with sarcasm. Good luck, gardener. Let's see how far those flowers get you. Stepping into college life felt like diving into deep water. It was thrilling yet daunting. Jenny, was far from the familiar paths of my family's expectations, ready to carve my own way in the world of landscape design. I still remember the buzz of the first day in class, the room swirling with the energy of eager students. I found a spot in the back, trying to shrink into the shadows. That's when Zoe, a girl with fire engine red hair and eyes full of mischief, dropped into the seat next to me. Hey there, newbie. I'm Zoe, a first-timer in landscape design. She introduced herself. I gave a shy nod. Yeah, I'm Jenny. It's all a bit overwhelming. Zoe's laugh was loud and genuine. You'll fit right in. Wait till you get your hands into the real dirt. It's epic. What dragged you into this world? She asked. I hesitated, the memory of my family's disapproval still fresh. I've always loved plants, the outdoors. It's where I feel right, you know? Her grin widened. Perfect place for you then. Classes were a whirlwind of learning and creating. I absorbed things like a sponge, from the science of soils to the art of design. I was finally speaking a language I loved. After one particularly intense session, Mr. Davidson, our professor, a man as tall and sturdy as an oak, called me over. Jenny, your designs. There's something else. You've got a real knack for this, he said, his voice serious. Mr. Davidson's encouragement stunned me. Really, thank you, Mr. Davidson. I'm just trying to do my best, I replied humbly. Leaning forward, his eyes piercing, he said, There's potential in you. Don't let it go to waste. Push harder. His words became my mantra. I moved into a studio, my designs becoming more ambitious, more expressive. It was exhausting but exhilarating. But even in those moments of joy, a part of me yearned for my family. Despite everything, one quiet evening, I gathered the courage to call home. The phone rang, each tone heavy with anticipation. Finally, Mom's sharp voice came through. What do you want, Jenny? Her tone stung, but I pushed on. I just wanted to check in, see how everyone is, I said. She snorted, her voice dripping with scorn. Oh, now you care. After running off to play in the dirt, abandoning your own family. Clenching my teeth, I fought to keep my voice steady. I didn't abandon anyone, Mom. I just chose a different path. Her laugh was bitter. A dead-end path, you mean? Don't expect us to be here waiting when it all crumbles around you. The call ended soon after, leaving a sour taste in my mouth, but also fueling a fire in me. I dove back into my work with a new intensity, determined to prove not just to my family, but to myself that I was on the right path. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of a phone call during my final year of college. It was Aunt Clara, my mom's sister, her voice shaky and strained. Jenny, it's about your Grandma Rose. She passed away last night, Aunt Clara said, her voice cracking with emotion. I felt the ground slip away beneath me. Grandma Rose had been my rock, the one person who believed in my dreams. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. The funeral was a somber affair. My family was there, all stiff and formal. Dad, Mom and Mike looked like strangers to me. After the service, I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Clara. I still can't believe she left that house to Jenny. What's she going to do with it? She can barely take care of herself, Mom said, her voice dripping with disapproval. I felt a surge of anger, but I bit my tongue. I didn't want a confrontation, not there, not then. The will reading was a few days later. Grandma Rose had left me her house, the beautiful garden haven where I had spent countless hours. My family was shocked, their whispers sharp as thorns. Why would she leave it to Jenny? She's never around anyway, Mike muttered under his breath. Dad's face was like thunder. This is ridiculous. That house could have been sold, put money into the restaurant, he said angrily. I stood up, my voice steady but firm. Grandma knew I loved that house, that garden. It was where we spent so much time together. I'm going to keep it, just as she wanted. Mom's response was cold and harsh. So you're just going to live there alone? Playing in the dirt? What a waste. Their words stung. But I had made up my mind. I moved into Grandma's house, immersing myself in the garden she had loved so dearly. I started renovating the place, pouring my heart into every plant, every flower bed. As the months passed, I transformed Grandma's garden into something truly special. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself, away from the judgment and expectations of my family. The day the invitation to Mike's wedding arrived at my doorstep was a day of mixed feelings. It was a fancy piece of paper, golden letters against a white background, representing a part of my life I had left behind. Staring at it, I felt a storm of emotions churn inside me. I decided to go, but on my terms. I dressed in a way that felt true to me, elegant but simple, a far cry from the dirt-stained clothes I used to wear. As they entered the restaurant, the sights and sounds of my past life engulfed me. Spotting my family across the room, Mom, Dad, and Mike, all dressed up and looking like a picture-perfect family, I braced myself and walked over. Jenny, I didn't think you'd accept the invitation. Mom's voice was sharp, cutting through the noise. I came to see Mike get married. It's a family event, isn't it? I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Mike glanced at me, his smirk familiar and unwelcome. What's the matter? Ran out of bushes to trim. Decided to play dress-up for a change. I felt a familiar sting, but I brushed it off. I'm just here to wish well, Mike. It was then that his bride, a tall woman with a haughty look, chimed in. Oh, this is the infamous gardener sister. Did you manage to scrub the dirt from under your nails, dear? Or is it your natural look? Her words were sharp and mocking, hanging in the air. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let her see how deeply they cut. I clean up just fine, thanks for asking. Congratulations to you both. Dad's eyes were cold, his voice colder. Your being here doesn't erase the past, Jenny. You chose your path. Their words were like thorns, but I had grown a thick skin. I'm not here to rehash old arguments, just wanted to wish Mike a happy married life. I was quickly ushered to a small table in the corner, away from the family. Sitting there, I could feel the curious stares and hushed whispers. That's the gardener, they whispered, the black sheep of the family. But as I sat there, a sense of pride welled up in me. Yes, I was the gardener, the one who had dared to follow her own path. I was no longer the shy, unsure girl they remembered, but a woman who had found her strength, who had bloomed in spite of them. My discomfort only grew as the evening stretched on. Sipping my drink, I tried to make myself invisible. But that plan fell apart when I caught the eye of some guys I knew from childhood. Mike's friends, the same ones who used to join him in mocking me. Look who's here, the family's little dirt digger, one of them, Jake, sneered as they approached. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Actually, it's landscape designer, but I wouldn't expect you to understand the difference. Their laughter was harsh, grating. Oh, listen to her. Thinks she's all high and mighty now, Chris added with a scoff. I bit back a sharp retort, my hands clenching under the table. I've worked hard for my success. My job is more than just playing in the dirt. Their amusement was cut short when an elderly man at the next table interjected. his expression growing increasingly disapproving. I've seen this young lady's work. The new park downtown, that's hers. It's outstanding shows. The group was visibly taken aback, their smugness faltering. Muttering under their breath, they slunk away, their egos bruised. Emboldened, I decided to venture out from my safe corner, mingling through the crowd, dodging glances and whispers. That's when I overheard Mike speaking to a group of his friends. She's always been the odd one, more into her plants than real work, Mike said, his voice laced with a mix of amusement and disdain. His friend laughed loudly. Every family's got its black sheep, huh? Their words were like a slap, raw and stinging. I walked away, my heart pounding, reminding myself that their opinions didn't define me. As I weaved through the crowd, I bumped into my cousin Lucy, a quiet presence in our loud family. Hey Jenny, I've seen some of your designs. They're really something, she said, her voice sincere. I managed a small smile. Thanks, Lucy. It means a lot, especially today. Lucy looked at me, her eyes understanding. I never agreed with how they treated you. You're doing amazing things. I'm glad you stuck to your path. Her words were a small comfort amidst the thorns of the evening. We chatted briefly, a momentary respite from the tension. As Lucy drifted away, I returned to my corner, feeling the weight of the evening. The loud music, the clinking glasses, and the bursts of laughter around me felt like they were happening in a different world. I sat there, sipping my drink, longing for the celebration to end. The wedding night was winding down, its fancy aura overshadowed by my own tangled feelings. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any more surreal, the mayor, a distant relative of Mike's bride, took the stage for his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a delight to be here, he began, his voice booming across the room. But tonight, I want to highlight a special guest among us, a true star in the world of landscape design, Jenny. Hearing my name, I almost choked on my drink. I stood up hesitantly, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. The mayor beamed at me. Jenny here is the brilliant mind behind the transformation of our city park. She's a celebrated landscape designer who's won multiple awards for her incredible work. Let's give her the recognition she deserves. The room erupted into applause, a sound that felt foreign to me. Glancing at my family's table, I saw their faces, a mix of shock and embarrassment. Mike's bride leaned towards him, her voice dripping with disbelief. Is he talking about your sister, the gardener? Mike mumbled something, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him up. The mayor's praise continued. Jenny's work has revitalized our city. She's a true talent. Amidst the clapping, I felt a surge of confidence. The mayor's words were like a light, dispelling the shadows of doubt and scorn from my family. Then, seizing the moment, I decided to speak up. Thank you, Mayor, for your kind words. It's an honor to contribute to our city's beauty. I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd, settling on my family. It's funny, isn't it, how life turns out? Mike, you and your bride are perfect for each other. Your shared talent for rudeness to others is quite remarkable. The room went silent, the air thick with tension. My parents, my brother, and his fiancée blushed deep red, their shame as visible as if I'd slapped them. Mom's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. Jenny, what are you saying? This is your brother's wedding. Mom interjected, her voice laced with concern. I met her gaze unflinching. Just speaking the truth, Mom, something our family seems to struggle with. Mike stood up, his face red with anger. You can't come here and talk to us like that. I held my ground, my voice steady. I've earned my right to speak, Mike. Maybe it's time you all listened. The confrontation ended with Mike sitting down defeated, and the room slowly buzzing back to life. The mayor gave me a nod of respect before moving on. As I sat back down, the weight of the night lifted slightly. I had spoken my piece, stood up for myself in a way I never had before. I was no longer just the gardener or the outcast. I was Jenny, a recognized landscape designer, someone who had grown past her family's narrow expectations. After Mike's wedding, word got out about my success as a landscape designer. People were buzzing about the awards I'd won and the projects I'd aced. It felt like stepping into the sunlight after years in the shadows. And then my family came calling. One afternoon, while I was busy sketching out a new garden design, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice had a sweetness to it that felt out of place. "Jenny, darling, we've been hearing so much about your work. Your father and I are so proud of you," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's a change of tune." There was a pause on the line. "Well, we were thinking maybe you could come over. We'd love to see you, catch up on things." I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "Catch up or catch onto my bank account?" I shot back. Mom's voice faltered. "Jenny, that's not fair. We're family." The word family hit a nerve. Family like when you all but disown me for following my dreams. Seems like family matters when there's money in the picture. Before she could respond, I ended the call. I wasn't about to let them back into my life just because they smelled success. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Mike was standing there, hands in his pockets, looking everywhere but at me. "Hey, Jenny, can we talk?" he mumbled. I crossed my arms. This should be good. "What do you want, Mike?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know we haven't been great, but you're doing well, and I was wondering if you could, help me out a bit." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Help you out? After years of calling me the gardener and laughing at my ambitions? Mike's face reddened. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just that things are tough." I cut him off. "Save it, Mike. I'm not your ATM. You and the family made it clear how you felt about me. You can't just waltz back into my life when it's convenient." After he left, I sat in my garden, surrounded by the beauty I had created. My phone rang a few more times over the next week. More attempts at reconciliation from my family, but I didn't answer. I was done with their fair-weather affection. I had built a life for myself, one that didn't need their validation or their greed. I was happy, successful, and free from the toxic ties that had once bound me. This wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a whole new book, my book, and I was going to make sure it was a bestseller, written on my own terms, in my own style. The new growth in my life was just starting, and I was ready for whatever came next. My brother-in-law, Kevin, surprised us by saying, "Truth is, I sold our house." My husband and I were so shocked that we couldn't speak. But the most surprised person was my mother-in-law. She asked why we did that and why we hadn't come to pick her up. My mother-in-law was really upset and started arguing with Kevin to calm down. Kevin tried to explain why he sold the house. "My name is Sandra, and I work from home with my husband, Robert. We loved working from home because we could take breaks whenever we needed." Then, my mother-in-law came to live with us. We were doing fine financially, but she kept asking us why we weren't going out to work. Every time she questioned us, I felt exhausted and frustrated. We tried to explain that we were working from home, but she didn't understand. She thought we were just fooling around and not thinking about our future. My mother-in-law was worried and often said she should have gone to live with Kevin instead. Kevin is Robert's brother, and he married a wealthy woman named Carol. But we knew Kevin wouldn't come to pick her up because he was too busy enjoying his rich wife's money. So, my mother-in-law kept waiting for Kevin to come and take her to his big house, hoping it would eventually become her house. But we knew it was unlikely to happen because Robert had already made it clear that she could live with him. However, Kevin refused to let his mother live with him. So we ended up living together. Even though we were called unemployed for doing remote work, we accepted it because that's just how my mother-in-law is. But then, out of nowhere, we got a call from Kevin. "I'll be coming over this weekend," he said, and then hung up before we could respond. Robert and I were confused about what to do. My mother-in-law overheard and got excited, thinking Kevin was coming to pick her up. "He's coming to pick me up. Please help me pack," she said, dragging Robert to her room. But Robert tried to explain that Kevin probably didn't mean that, but she didn't believe him. "He didn't say anything about picking you up, did he?" Robert asked. "He didn't say it, but he must be coming for me," she insisted. We couldn't understand why she was so sure. Since she came to our house, She did whatever she wanted, didn't do any housework, and relied on the money we gave her. We didn't want to force her to stay, so we packed her bags and waited for Kevin to come. When Kevin and his wife arrived over the weekend, they seemed suspiciously nice. My mother-in-law greeted them happily, complaining about us not treating her well. "You guys don't mistreat Mom," Kevin said, defending her. "We're not mistreating her. We give her money and let her eat whatever she likes," Robert explained. "Sandra is handling the house chores," Robert said, looking uneasy, but Kevin seemed suspicious. Robert has always been a bit clueless, probably treating Mom badly without even realizing it. "And it seems Sandra isn't the considerate type," Kevin said, agreeing with my mother-in-law. Hearing this conversation, Robert and I couldn't help but frown. Despite this, we decided to entertain our guests and led them to the living room. We all sat around the table, with Robert and me on one side and the couple on the other. "What are you sitting around for? Serve the tea," my mother-in-law demanded. "I thought you were going to make the tea, mother-in-law," I replied. Making an old woman work. "You see, Kevin, Sandra is this kind of person," she said, even fake crying. I was too stunned by her behavior to argue back. After I served the tea, Kevin and his wife became serious. "The truth is, we sold our house," Kevin said. Robert and I were shocked, and my mother-in-law was the most surprised. "Why would you do something like that? Didn't you come to pick me up?" she asked, flustered. Kevin tried to calm her down, explaining that they were in debt and needed a place to stay temporarily. "What debt?" my mother-in-law asked. "I was trying to start a business, but it didn't go well," Kevin explained, laughing nervously. Robert and I sighed, feeling exasperated. "We only need to stay until we find a new house. Please, we have nowhere else to turn," Kevin pleaded. Feeling a bit conflicted, we agreed to let them stay temporarily, but made them promise to leave within a month. "Got it," Kevin said, still laughing nervously as they went back to prepare to move their things. After Kevin and his wife left, my mother-in-law sat silently, looking thoughtful. We assumed she was still in shock. The next day, their belongings arrived promptly. "We have so much stuff. Where should we put it all? We might have to sell some or rent a locker," we discussed, while moving Kevin's things. Suddenly, my mother-in-law dropped a bombshell. "I've been thinking. Wouldn't we be more secure in the future if Kevin's here? So you freeloaders can leave, can't you?" she said abruptly. My husband and I were taken aback by her sudden demand. "If you insist, I can tolerate Robert staying, but I don't need a wife who can't do anything. Get a divorce, then the space that Sandra was occupying can be used for all these packages," she eagerly suggested, looking at my husband for agreement. "What are you talking about?" he reacted, astounded as usual. Then, my brother-in-law and his wife arrived. My mother-in-law greeted them joyfully, but I was still shaken by her earlier words. Despite this, my husband decided to ignore them for the moment and asked his brother to deal with the packages. "There are more than I thought. Try to reduce the number, rent a locker, or sell some if you have to," my husband suggested. But his brother didn't like the idea. "These are important packages. How could I sell them? What if someone steals them from a locker or they get damaged? Are you going to take responsibility, bro?" he retorted. My husband shook his head, disappointed by his brother's selfishness. "This is our house, you know. It's only natural that you should endure some inconvenience. If you don't like it, find a place to live quickly and leave," my husband asserted. At that moment, my mother-in-law interrupted, shouting, "What are you talking about? Didn't I just say if you two are not happy with Kevin and the rest, you can leave? You're basically freeloaders. You're not needed in this house. Kevin is trying to start a business, and all you two do is loaf around the house doing so-called remote work. You're a nuisance." My husband and I looked at each other in disbelief, while my brother-in-law and his wife were surprised by my mother-in-law's words. But then they started to smirk. "That might not be a bad idea," Kevin said. "Mom, that's a good idea. Yeah, it's a hassle to look for a place, so we could live here." So sell this house to us, right, Carol? I feel uncomfortable with you two around, so it would be helpful if you sold this place to us. Plus, it seems like our mother-in-law is on our side, so sell this place to us, Carol chimed in. My husband and I were dumbfounded at their words. What nonsense are you? My husband began, but was interrupted by my mother-in-law, who gloated, See, both Kevin and Carol are saying the same thing. So what will you do, Robert? If you're going to divorce, you can stay here, she said, glaring at me triumphantly. I braced myself to retaliate, but my husband spoke first. Don't you just say whatever you want? Why does Sandra have to leave? He said, his face red with anger, raising his voice. Don't shout like that. It's better without a burden around, isn't it? My mother-in-law retorted. But my husband responded in an exasperated tone. You don't understand anything. This is Sandra's house. At my husband's words, my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and his wife gasped. My husband continued, adding to the tension. This is the house that Sandra bought for our life together. What? What are you saying? Isn't it the husband's job to buy the house? There's no such rule. Moreover, Sandra covers all of Mom's allowance and living expenses. Sandra said she'd take on that burden because your pension is minimal, and it would be difficult for you to have financial freedom with just that, Robert explained, glaring at his mother-in-law with an intense expression. Despite this, my mother-in-law seemed to disbelieve, looking at me and snickering in disbelief. Unbelievable. Sandra just plays on the computer all day. She doesn't even do housework seriously. Wasn't my allowance coming out of my pension? Otherwise, there's no way Sandra could afford to give me $500 a month, she said. Moreover, my mother-in-law continued, Sandra is the one managing my pension, isn't she? You might have told Robert otherwise, but I'm sure you're dipping into my pension, she accused, puffing up her chest and glaring at me. I glared back, not to be outdone. It's true I've succeeded as a business owner. You're lying? Divorce this lying wife already. You should live here with me and Kevin and Carol. Besides, there's no proof that Sandra's earning money. Here it is, she said, as I pulled out my paycheck and showed it to her. The sight of it left my mother-in-law, Kevin, and his wife slack-jawed. We've not used any of Mom's pensions since she moved in here. If Mom ever wanted to leave, Sandra has been managing it so she could live independently. But instead, Mom, you've been bossing Sandra around, interfering with her work. You're the problem. If you don't like Sandra, you should leave right now, Robert asserted. I don't believe any of this, my mother-in-law insisted. We don't mind if you and Kevin temporarily stay, but some patience should be expected. We didn't want you to live here in the first place. We only agreed because you begged us, Robert said, glaring at Kevin and his wife. Kevin and his wife broke out in a cold sweat, not used to Robert raising his voice. Just kidding. But you sure are earning a lot, huh? I wish you could teach me some business tricks, right, Carol? Robert said, lightening the mood. While it's true, we were worried about living with our sister-in-law. It seems like she's a good person after all. Kevin and his wife smiled at each other. But my mother-in-law was unyielding. Don't act so high and mighty. You're just a bum enough, Robert. You should leave too. You should go outside and see how harsh this world can be. My mother-in-law filled with conviction, refusing to listen to anything we said. Afterward, Robert and I sighed in disbelief. Interrupting her, I said, Well, if that's how you feel, we'll pack our things and move to a new house. You guys will be stuck with a mortgage, but if that's okay with you, don't come crying to us for help. If you insist, mother-in-law will leave, even with a pension. Maintaining your lifestyle will be challenging. But I guess that can't be helped, can it? At our words, my mother-in-law turned beet red and yelled at us to get out. Wait, you can't be serious. We don't have to do that, do we? We protested. Yes, if you two are here, we're safe. Kevin and his wife tried to stop us. But my mother-in-law gave us a fierce look and said, Don't you dare talk back, Kevin. You're going to be a CEO, aren't you? I don't mind you using my pension, so just start a company and show us how successful you can become. I'll show you what happens when you defy us." My mother-in-law's words were filled with intensity. Hearing this, we decided it was best to no longer get involved with her or Kevin's family and left the house. Of course, the mortgage on the house remained, but we changed the ownership to Kevin's name. Some time had passed since then. While there was some residual dissatisfaction from that incident, having been free from my mother-in-law's sarcasm, we had resumed our normal routine. Just when we were working from home in our new apartment as usual, my mother-in-law called my husband crying. "Kevin has taken my pension and disappeared. He hasn't come back in a week. Carol and I are left alone in the house, and we're in trouble. Please help us," she wept. After my husband calmed my mother-in-law, he asked why Kevin had gone missing. I gave all of my pension to Kevin for his startup, but he ended up spending it all on gambling. When I confronted him about it, he disappeared, she cried out desperately. Since my mother-in-law couldn't continue the conversation through her sobbing, the phone was handed to Carol. "Could you please call us back? We can't live like this. Ever since Kevin failed his startup and sold the house we were living in, our parents have disowned us. My dad won't forgive us for selling that house. We haven't been able to reach either our dad or mom since," Carol pleaded with my husband. At the sight of them, my husband muttered, "I knew it," in a disgusted tone. "That's unfortunate, but don't involve us. We warned you when we left, didn't we? Even if you come crying to us, we won't help you. You can report Kevin as missing to the police. It's none of our business," he said, and then hung up. I was shocked, but my husband said they got what they deserved, and I agreed. After that, they called my husband's cell phone many times. When my husband, frustrated, answered the phone, Carol would cry about not knowing how to report Kevin as missing. We were surprised she didn't know and gave her advice to call the police. However, they still couldn't find Kevin. Just when we thought they might not find him, we heard that Kevin had been arrested for bank robbery in another state. Apparently, he did it to repay his debt. It seems it wasn't his first offense, and he would likely face actual jail time. Carol can't go back to her parents' home and is still living with my mother-in-law in that house. It's uncertain whether or not she will divorce Kevin. That's probably the least of her concerns right now. She registered with a temp agency and is struggling with her first job ever, but she's somehow making ends meet every day. As for my mother-in-law, Kevin took all of her pension, and now she has to repay his debt. She has also started working part-time to repay the debt. My husband and I expressed sympathy for my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family, but we have made it clear that we have no intention of helping them, and we have cut off all communication. They must be tasting the harsh realities of life that my mother-in-law always talked about. Despite the changes since my mother-in-law moved in with us, my husband and I are glad that we have returned to our peaceful days. Throughout my life, I've weathered the storm of disdain, clinging on despite the relentless disapproval. As a mother, I felt it was my solemn duty to shield my child until they could stand on their own. But today, as Sam donned his graduation cap, I made the difficult choice to depart from my family. Despite my efforts, the weight of resentment and animosity persisted. Yet I persisted under the guise of motherhood and wifely obligations. However, those days are now behind me, and I've broken free from the confines of familial expectations. As I broke the news to Sam over the phone, I sensed his stunned silence. It marked the first instance where I stood my ground against perpetual criticism. However, his reaction mattered little, for we were no longer bound by the ties of family. My name is Maya, a 45-year-old housewife, residing with my husband Luke and our son Sam. Sam, at 18, was on the brink of graduating high school, an occasion that should have been cause for jubilation. Yet my joy was tainted by Sam's demeanor. "Where's my shirt? You didn't steal it, did you?" he barked one day as I folded laundry. Retrieving his shirt from the basket, I handed it over, only to be met with his unwarranted anger. "You're so inefficient. Can't you put the shirt in my room while I'm sleeping? Don't make me ask for it," he snapped, his words piercing my heart. Helpless, I could only offer apologies, devoid of any retort. Satisfied, Sam issued a warning. If you make me angry again, I won't forgive you. Next time, I'll kick you out of the family. His contemptuous behavior had begun 13 years earlier, when he was just 5. From using foul language to displaying defiance, Sam's demeanor had only deteriorated over time. Luke dismissed it as a phase, attributing it to the influence of cartoon villains, a sentiment that offered little solace in the face of relentless hostility. I made the decision to observe and occasionally guide Sam's behavior, aiming for a balance between correction and understanding. Unfortunately, my efforts seemed to backfire, and Sam's conduct only deteriorated. The scarcity of "thank you" in his vocabulary became more noticeable than his outbursts, making meaningful family conversations an elusive prospect. Time marched on, and now, as Sam turned 18, I stumbled upon a conversation between him and Luke 3 days ago. Shockingly, I discovered Sam's college plans post-graduation, a decision he hadn't bothered to discuss with me. It became evident that Sam leaned heavily on Luke, their camaraderie evident in their outings together. Perhaps, I thought, it was easier for men to communicate with each other. Yearning for acceptance as a family member, I harbored a deep desire to experience the joys of a harmonious family life. However, that dream remained elusive, and the pain was akin to my heart tearing apart. It wasn't just Sam pushing me away. Even Luke harbored disdain. He criticized me openly, labeling me as stupid and highlighting perceived shortcomings in my role as a housewife. Luke's attitude toward me had changed drastically since Sam's behavior took a negative turn 13 years ago. Initially, we shared household responsibilities, with Luke advocating that being a housewife didn't mean shouldering all the housework. However, after Sam's birth, Luke's active involvement waned, and he gradually withdrew from both parenting and domestic tasks. Attempts to discuss my feelings with him only led to implications that I wasn't trying hard enough. Luke's criticisms, like "you can't even clean properly," and "you haven't grown at all as a wife," echoed in my mind. Apologies and promises to improve fell on deaf ears, as Luke believed that I never made progress. The weight of his words added to the stress of not connecting with Sam. Realizing that Luke, too, saw me as undeserving of the role of a wife or family member, I felt on the verge of collapse. I endured this torment for 13 long years, teetering on the brink of breaking. I saw myself as a mother, a wife, constantly convincing myself that I must do what's necessary. I pushed myself to the brink, ignoring exhaustion and forcing my tired body to keep moving. The fear of becoming obsolete to Luke and Sam haunted me, pushing me to continue despite my limitations. As Sam's high school graduation approached, I only learned the date 3 days before the ceremony. Luke, while doing chores, asked about the clothes for the event, and I confessed my ignorance about the date. It turned out Sam had informed Luke a week prior, leaving me once again out of the loop. The reality of exclusion had become a painful daily norm for the past 13 years. Unable to recover from the constant shocks, I was looking down when Sam, with no school that day, emerged from his room. He chided me for spreading gloom, blaming me for the somber atmosphere. However, it was Sam's fault for not informing me about the graduation date in the first place. Confronting him, I learned that the ceremony was in 3 days, and his response was dismissive, claiming I wasn't going anyway, deeming me an embarrassment. His words, refusing my attendance at the graduation ceremony, pierced my heart. Despite being treated as an outsider, I had always celebrated Sam's academic achievements. Now I was denied even the right to witness his graduation. Silenced by his harsh words, I realized my heart had reached its limit long ago. On the day of Sam's high school graduation, Luke and Sam left for the ceremony without me. Sam had expressed his desire for Luke to be there, leaving me behind. Enduring this reality was no longer an option. As soon as they left, I packed my belongings and departed for my parents' house. Convinced that I could no longer endure life as part of Sam and Luke's family, I planned to take a break at my parents' house and prepare to sever ties with them. Leaving behind a letter at home, I expressed my consideration of divorce and the desire to live independently. I mentioned the need to discuss details through a lawyer, a challenging task within the 3-day time frame. Selling the house, which was inherited from my father, added to the list of tasks. My dad, a wealthy businessman, had gifted us the house as a wedding present. However, knowing my predicament, my father would likely decide to sell it, deeming the house unnecessary to Luke and me. In the letter, I clearly stated that the house would be sold, and I encouraged them to take whatever belongings they needed and vacate within a week. While my dad praised me for this decision, I wanted to preemptively address any potential complaints. For now, I'd opted to stay at my parents' house, seeking refuge while I severed ties with my family and began the process of healing from the wounds they had inflicted. It required considerable courage to make this decision, and I felt indebted to my dad, who reacted with anger upon hearing my story, vehemently condemning the mistreatment. Relaxing at my parents' house after such a day, my mobile phone indicated an incoming call. Though I anticipated it was Sam, I checked anyway, confirming my suspicion. Perhaps he called about my absence mentioned in the letter. Honestly, I didn't feel inclined to engage in conversation. After enduring years of being treated as less than family, I lacked the generosity to deal with Sam. However, I recognized the need to confront the past instead of running away, resolving not to let my heart remain unresolved. Answering the phone, Sam's loud and panicked voice demanded to know my whereabouts. He expressed disbelief at the letter and insisted I return home immediately. I couldn't help but smile at his desperation, though he was too consumed by anger to notice. Responding to Sam, I played along, questioning who he was. Sam, confused by my words, began laughing, attempting to dismiss my actions as bad news and accusing me of an inability to live without relying on family. Despite his unpleasant words, I detected a slight tremor in his voice, realizing Sam was also out of his depth. He continued blaming, criticizing, and trying to panic me into returning. Responding calmly, I declared that I didn't have a family, emphasizing that Sam and Luke were not my family. I challenged the notion of family, stating that true family should support and help each other, something Sam and Luke neglected for 13 years, claiming their mistreatment was normal. Enduring 13 years surprised me, fueled by a sense of duty stemming from giving birth to Sam. Despite not being treated as family, the unshakable fact that I am Sam's mother by blood kept me going. I resolved to wait until his high school graduation, hoping that if Sam changed his attitude, I might reconsider cutting ties and continue as a family. However, recalling Sam's demeanor just 3 days before the ceremony made it clear that my expectations were not met. Convinced it was time to take an appropriate stance, I asserted that Sam was no longer my family, relieving me of any obligation to treat him as one. Sam, finally grasping my intentions, urged me to stop the act, insisting that we are family. He questioned the seriousness of selling the house, expressing concern about losing our residence. Remaining resolute, I dismissed his pleas, even as he begged me not to call it a joke and emphasized that he thought the house belonged to his dad, not realizing it was a family inheritance. I coldly told him not to call again, standing firm in my decision. Frustrated, Sam reached his limit and declared that he would involve Luke. Soon, Luke came on the phone, his voice filled with anger, urging me to return home immediately. He couldn't accept what I had done, accusing me of playing around and questioning if I thought I could be forgiven for abandoning my family. Luke's words, rapid and furious, were accompanied by Sam's voice in the background, encouraging him. It no longer mattered to me how angry they were. I reiterated that I was no longer their family, expressing my refusal to act like one after being ignored for 13 years. My words were harsher than I anticipated, fueled by the resentment of their selfish actions. Despite my efforts to be a family, they never treated me as one, leaving me perpetually lonely and in pain. My longing to be treated as family went unanswered for 13 years, but I couldn't easily give up on the decision I had made. enduring for 13 years in an attempt to make it work as a family, especially as Sam's mother, led to this regrettable outcome. A dry laugh escaped me as I contemplated this pathetic result. They never respected or accepted my feelings, never reciprocating the care I showed them. Now, when it's inconvenient for them, they hastily declare, "We're family," attempting to pull me back. The convenience of it all made me nauseous. Reflecting on my decision to endure for 13 years for these people, even feeling the responsibility as a mother, I regret not being kinder to myself. Could things have been different if I had been? Perhaps there was a future where Sam, Luke, and I understood each other, forming a happy family. But that possibility is now nothing more than a distant maybe. I no longer hold any expectations or trust in Sam or Luke, and even if they were to apologize now and express a desire to be a family, I would never consider trying again with them. Enough already. I am not their family anymore. I am a stranger treated as such for 13 years, and I have no intention of coming back. Impulsively, I spoke words I never would have uttered before. Unafraid of causing trouble, they flowed out uncontrollably. I couldn't stop them. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I can't trust anything you say anymore. I absolutely can't see us continuing as a family. Write up the divorce papers. If you don't want to file them, I will. So send them to me and leave the house quickly. You wouldn't want to trouble strangers, right? But stop making excuses and get ready. Give up. Goodbye." I cut off Luke even as he tried to say something because I couldn't bear to hear anything more from him or Sam. After expressing what I wanted, I hung up the phone. Ignoring Luke's pleas, I blocked all calls from him and Sam, even refusing to answer the home phone with my parents' permission. Finally, I managed to sever ties with a family that had made my life miserable for 13 years. They tried to reach me through friends, but I kept hiding, avoiding any contact with them. Eventually, the divorce from Luke was finalized despite his repeated pleas against it. He signed the papers without resistance when it came to court. The house, which belonged to my dad, was sold, and they had to leave. A friend informed me that after the incident with me, they started fighting incessantly. Luke's inability to manage finances resulted in Sam's college fees going unpaid, forcing Sam to give up his academic path and start working. Sam quit studying, and Luke quit his job in shock. They now live in an old apartment, seemingly withdrawn. While they continue to look for me, I have no intention of ever showing my face to them again. Meanwhile, I found a job and moved out of my parents' house. Drawing on my experience as an office clerk before marriage, I adjusted well in my new job. Soon after, I found a new place and thanked my parents for their support, moving out to a room in an apartment not too far from their house. In my new home, I am living happily now. Without good memories of my family, I've realized that being alone in this day and age is perfectly fine. I plan to live a relaxed life on my own.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lena. I'm 28 years old and a graphic designer. This is the story of how my perfect romance unraveled into a nightmare. It all began last spring at the Tech Vision conference in Chicago. I was presenting my design portfolio, showcasing my unique fusion of traditional art and digital media. That's when I noticed him, a tall, charming man in the audience who seemed captivated by my work. After the session, he approached me, his blue eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Your work is incredible," he said. "The way you blend traditional and digital techniques is unlike anything I've ever seen." That was James. My heart fluttered as we exchanged numbers, and by the following week, we were meeting for morning coffee dates before work. James was everything I thought I wanted: successful, attentive, and so understanding. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," he'd say, and I believed him. 3 months into our relationship, James introduced me to his family. His sister, Sarah, was intense, to say the least. "James tells me everything about you," she said, her piercing gaze making me feel like a specimen under a microscope. Her husband, Mike, was quieter, simply nodding along to whatever Sarah said. "We're incredibly close," James explained. "Sarah practically raised me after our dad passed away." Then there was Barbara, their mother, who had an unsettling habit of comparing me to James' ex-girlfriends. "You're much more suitable than the others," she remarked, her tone making it clear that I was being evaluated. My best friend Diane noticed red flags before I did. "Don't you think it's strange how he checks your location so often?" she asked over coffee one day. "He's just protective," I replied, brushing off her concerns. "He worries about me." But things took a darker turn as time went on. James proposed after a year of dating and the wedding. Well, it was everything Sarah wanted it to be. Looking back, I realize now how much control she had over every detail of our lives. "We should live closer to Sarah," James suggested shortly after the honeymoon. "She knows all the best neighborhoods and schools." Even when I planned a simple dinner with Diane, James would find a way to dissuade me. "Baby, you've been so tired lately. Why don't we just stay in? Besides, Sarah's coming over." Then came the news that changed everything. I was pregnant. Overwhelmed with joy, I took 3 tests just to be sure. James seemed thrilled, but Sarah's reaction was off. "You need to be extremely careful," she said, gripping my arm a little too tightly. "Our family has a history of complicated pregnancies. Dr. Thompson will oversee everything to make sure it goes smoothly." Dr. Thompson, the family doctor, had always been unnervingly close to Sarah. I'd even caught them holding hands once when they thought no one was looking. But I was too excited about the baby to dwell on it, too blind to notice the exchanged glances or how James' reassuring words felt hollow. "We'll take really good care of you," James said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You won't have to worry about a thing." Things spiraled further when Sarah received devastating news she was infertile. I overheard her crying in the kitchen one morning, confiding in Dr. Thompson. "It's not fair," she sobbed. "I'll never have my own baby." After that, Sarah became obsessed with my pregnancy. She'd show up unannounced, placing her hands on my belly without asking. "This baby will be so special to our family," she'd whisper with an unsettling intensity. James's behavior shifted too. One morning, he took my phone while I was in the shower. "The radiation isn't good for the baby," he said when I protested. "Dr. Thompson agrees. We'll get you a landline instead." Then came my work. "Honey, about your job," James began cautiously. "Dr. Thompson thinks the stress could harm the baby. You don't need to work. We can afford for you to stay home." Bit by bit, my world grew smaller, until I could barely recognize the life I once had. If only I had realized sooner what they meant by taking care of me. "But I love my job," I argued. "I need to talk to Diane about all this." James's face darkened. "Diane doesn't understand our family dynamics. Besides, Dr. Thompson strongly recommends limiting outside contact to prevent infections." Dr. Thompson backed him up, as always, with medical jargon I couldn't refute. "Your pregnancy is extremely delicate," he explained during one of his home visits. "Complete bed rest and isolation are necessary." Sarah, of course, stepped in to help. She took over everything, spending hours in the nursery. "The crib should face east for better energy," she declared one day. When I disagreed, she snapped, "I've researched this extensively. I know what's best." Barbara chimed in during her frequent visits, always praising their controlling behavior. "You're so blessed to have such a devoted family," she cooed. When I was pregnant, I had to do everything myself. But something was wrong. After taking my prenatal vitamins, I started feeling strange, exhausted all the time. "Why am I so sleepy?" I asked during a checkup. "Perfectly normal," Dr. Thompson assured me. "Pregnancy affects everyone differently." Then, one morning, I overheard a whispered conversation between Sarah and James outside my bedroom door. "The nursery at my house is almost ready," Sarah said softly. "Are you sure about this?" James sounded hesitant. "It's for the best. She's clearly not stable enough to handle motherhood." My blood ran cold. I felt trapped in my own home. Security cameras appeared for my safety. The windows were child-locked to prevent accidents. Even my food was strictly monitored. "Everything must be organic and prepared properly," Sarah insisted, throwing away snacks I'd hidden. When I tried to make a call on the landline, I discovered it was rigged to connect only to family. "See how much we care about you," Barbara said smugly. Most women would kill for this kind of attention. The drowsiness worsened. Sometimes, I'd wake up without remembering falling asleep, only to find Sarah hovering over me, measuring my belly or rummaging through my belongings. "Just checking on my favorite sister-in-law," she'd say with a saccharine smile. I knew something was terribly wrong, but in my drugged state, I could barely think straight. I needed help, but who could I trust when my entire world had become a carefully constructed prison? Then, during one of Sarah's obsessive cleaning sessions, she got called away for an emergency at work. In her haste, she left behind her designer bag, something she always kept close. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, I found a leather-bound diary. What I read made my blood turn to ice. Plan is proceeding perfectly. One entry read, James agrees it's best for everyone. After the birth, will prove she's unstable. Dr. T will testify about her paranoid behavior and depression. The baby will be safer with me. Another entry detailed fabricated symptoms, dates, and even photos of a psychiatric facility they had already chosen. Met with Dr. Thompson today. He'll adjust her medical records to show a history of mental instability. Cost us a pretty penny, but worth it. He's always had a soft spot for me. The sound of a car pulling up jolted me. I quickly returned the diary and rushed back to bed. Moments later, Sarah burst in, her smile as fake as ever. Sorry about that emergency. Now, where were we with the nursery plans? I pretended everything was normal, even as my world crumbled around me. The next day, during Barbara's usual 15-minute bathroom break, I heard a faint tap at my window. Diane? I whispered, barely believing my eyes. She slipped inside. I've been watching the house for weeks, she said. I knew something was wrong when you stopped answering calls. Diane had brought a burner phone and tiny cameras. We need proof, she said, planting them around the house, especially in the kitchen where my food and vitamins were prepared. That night, the cameras captured James crushing pills into my prenatal vitamins while Sarah supervised. Mom's got the paperwork ready, James said. After the birth, everything needs to move quickly. Dr. Thompson says we can claim postpartum psychosis, Sarah replied. No one will question it. Through the burner phone, Diane helped me gather more evidence. We recorded conversations, documented my confinement, and photographed the tampered vitamins. They're using benzodiazepines, Diane revealed after sneaking a sample to her pharmacist friend. That's why you're always drowsy. The deeper we dug, the darker it got. Barbara had been feeding my family lies, telling them I needed space during a difficult pregnancy. But now I had a lifeline, and with Diane by my side, I vowed to expose the truth and reclaim my life, no matter the cost. Dr. Thompson had an entire file of falsified medical records prepared. Even Mike, Sarah's husband, was in on it. There were texts about him drafting the legal documents for my institutionalization. We need to get you out, Diane said during another secret visit. But we have to be smart about it. They're all in on this. Sarah, James, your mother-in-law, even the doctor. I rubbed my growing belly, feeling the baby kick. They want to steal my baby, I whispered. My own husband. How could he do this? Don't worry, Diane squeezed my hand, her voice firm. I've got a plan, but we'll only get one shot at this. We waited until their weekly family breakfast, an hours-long tradition at Sarah's house where they gathered to discuss their sinister plans for my baby. The irony wasn't lost on me as Diane whispered, They're all there. The security camera confirms it. Let's move. My hands trembled as we drove to Mount Sinai Hospital. The new doctors were horrified by my test results. These drug levels, the emergency physician said, shaking his head as he documented everything. Someone has been systematically sedating you. This is criminal. I called Anna, my old college roommate turned investigative journalist. When she saw the evidence, she said, This is bigger than a family dispute. This is a scandal. The story broke like a tsunami. The headline read, Prominent doctor and family's sinister plot to steal unborn child. National news stations picked it up, but that was just the beginning. Mrs. Anderson, we need to talk about your husband's financial activities, a corporate investigator told me at the safe house. It turned out James had been embezzling company funds for years, funneling money into Sarah's endless IVF treatments. He's stolen nearly $500,000, the investigator explained. We're pressing charges. Sarah's world imploded next. Her fraudulent insurance claims for non-existent fertility treatments came to light. During her very public divorce proceedings, she screamed at Mike, I did it for us. Everything I did was to give us a family. The day Dr. Thompson was arrested, my water broke. Diane stayed by my side through 16 grueling hours of labor. It's a girl, the doctor announced, placing her in my arms. Hello, Emma. I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "You're safe now." The sentencing hearings followed. James received 12 years for embezzlement, conspiracy, and attempted kidnapping. Dr. Thompson lost his medical license and was sentenced to 8 years. Sarah received 5 years for insurance fraud and conspiracy. During the final hearing, I addressed the court. They tried to steal not just my baby, but my sanity and my life. Sometimes the best revenge isn't watching your enemies fall. It's rising so far above them that their schemes seem small and pathetic in comparison. Today, Emma and I are thriving. She's proof that love doesn't need control or manipulation, it just needs to be real. But I often wonder, what would you do if you discovered your spouse and their entire family were secretly drugging you and plotting to steal your child? Would you expose them immediately, risking that they destroy the evidence, or would you gather proof first, even if it meant enduring more abuse?
After 16 years, my family ready to reconnect with me after abandoning me. This tale traces back 25 years to 1998, when I, then 17 years old, now 42, dwelled in a small town in central Mexico. The genesis of this narrative coincides with my high school years, where I struck a friendship with Lily, a classmate. Our camaraderie blossomed swiftly, prompting an invitation from Lily to her abode, an offer I accepted without hesitation. Upon arrival, we delved into academic tasks before diverting our attention to video games. In a serendipitous twist, the entrance of a girl resembling Lily interrupted our gaming session. To my surprise, this doppelganger was none other than Lily's twin sister, Rachel. Engaging in initial banter, the trio soon dwindled to a tete-a-tete between Rachel and myself, culminating in a favorable first encounter. Though recollections may be hazy, the gist remains clear. Subsequent to this inaugural rendezvous, Rachel and I fostered a connection. Our shared moments burgeoned into walks and leisurely outings, gradually nurturing an affection that transcended mere friendship. Several dates ensued, leading to the formalization of our relationship at the age of 19. It's essential to note that Rachel faces 2 disabilities: congenital blindness and cardiac arrhythmia, the latter diagnosed at the age of 16. Initially, adapting to life with a disabled partner posed challenges, especially considering Rachel's significant health concerns compared to Lily's minor myopia. Driven by both personal resolve and the encouragement of Rachel's family, I made the decision to pivot from my accounting studies to pursue medicine. This transition involved undertaking courses and specialized training, primarily focused on managing Rachel's cardiac arrhythmia. Despite the initial complexity, my commitment stemmed from a deep love for her. Ensuring her well-being became my utmost priority. At that juncture, Rachel embodied what some might term the epitome of perfection. Beyond her physical beauty, her personality radiated brilliance. Intelligent, charismatic, empathetic, nurturing, and affectionate. Her ability to connect deeply with others garnered her widespread admiration and affection within our small community. In the year 2000, our romance blossomed as Rachel and I pursued our college education. Our families rejoiced in our union, having been close even before our relationship began. The knowledge of our love filled them with immense joy. My mother and Rachel's mother shared a strong friendship, while my father found camaraderie in discussing work matters with Rachel's mother. My bond with Rachel's family extended deep, to the extent that I had the honor of serving as the best man at her older sister's wedding. Despite the absence of Rachel's father, who had passed away when she was merely 7 years old, his memory remained cherished within her family. At that time, my own family comprised my parents and my 3 younger siblings. Isaac, who was a year younger than me, Louis, 3 years my junior, and Daniel, 4 years younger than me. Our familial structure was complemented by Rachel's family, which included her mother Tanya, her older sister Sophia, and her twin sister Lily, in addition to Rachel herself. By 2003, Rachel and I had completed our college education, and at the age of 22, made the decision to embark on the journey of marriage. The announcement of our impending union filled our families with immense joy, and our wedding day became a cherished memory, characterized by perfection in every detail. from the venue to the cuisine to the music. With the vows exchanged, we embarked on the adventure of married life, moving in together to commence our shared journey. In the initial days following our wedding, I observed a fleeting sense of unease in Rachel, which she attributed to post-wedding stress. However, her spirits soon lifted, and she resumed her usual vibrant self. A month later, our familial sphere was shaken by the sudden disappearance of Lily, Rachel's twin sister. Lily, who worked as an accountant in a city bank, had vanished without a trace, disrupting our customary Friday evening gatherings. Concerned, I reached out to Rachel, only to be met with silence on the matter. It wasn't until Rachel's mother, Tanya, divulged the grim truth that the gravity of the situation became clear. According to Tanya, Lily had been apprehended and subsequently convicted for actions deemed as betrayal and theft, tarnishing the family's reputation in the process. The severity of Lily's transgressions led to a 13-year prison sentence, marking the culmination of a tragic saga that estranged her from her family entirely. The depths of their rejection were such that they refused to attend her trial, severing all ties once her fate was sealed. Over the following 2 years, life settled into a tranquil rhythm. I found employment as an accountant at a small city firm, while Rachel dedicated herself to teaching visually impaired individuals. Our marriage flourished, characterized by its unwavering love and communication. Despite the challenges posed by Rachel's disabilities, our emotional and physical bond remained strong. While my professional commitments often demanded much of my time, I made a conscious effort to allocate at least 3 hours each day to spend with Rachel, ensuring we nurtured our relationship. We maintained a weekly date night, and thoughts of starting a family began to occupy our conversations. In 2005, I embarked on a business trip alongside some colleagues to finalize a lucrative deal for our company. The only significant person involved was a former coworker named Emma, with whom I had minimal interaction beyond professional duties. After successfully concluding the negotiations, my coworkers suggested celebrating at a local bar. The celebration unfolded predictably, with most of my colleagues indulging in excessive drinking. Personally, I refrained from overindulgence, engaging instead in conversation with various coworkers. Eventually, I decided to call it a night and headed back to our hotel. As I made my exit, I unexpectedly collided with Emma, who, like many others, was visibly intoxicated. Despite her inebriated state, I attempted to assist her to her feet, but her condition rendered it impossible. Sensing the need to intervene, one of my companions suggested escorting Emma back to the hotel, a proposition to which I assented. Offering her support, I guided Emma back, intending to leave her at the door of her room. However, circumstances led me to carry her all the way to her bed before promptly returning to my own room. The following day passed uneventfully, and we all departed for our respective homes without incident. However, 4 days later, upon returning from work, I was greeted by the unexpected sight of my parents' and Tanya's vehicles parked outside my residence. Upon stepping into the living room, I was met with a scene of palpable fury. Rachel's mother, her older sister, and my own parents stood with stern expressions, while Rachel sat on the couch, tears streaming down her face. She was 4 weeks pregnant at the time. Before I could fully grasp the situation, Sophia delivered a resounding slap across my face, igniting a cacophony of accusatory screams. Confused and bewildered, I demanded an explanation for their rage. Rachel finally spoke, uttering only the words, "Why did you do that?" Her question bewildered me, and I pressed for clarification. Suddenly, the room erupted with accusations of infidelity, all directed at me. Tanya revealed that Emma had approached her with a fabricated tale of an affair between us, alleging that it began as an emotional betrayal and escalated into a physical relationship during my recent business trip. Emma's narrative, apparently laced with cruel remarks about Rachel's condition, had been disturbingly convincing. Despite vehement denials and pleas for belief, I found myself confronted with damning testimony from fellow trip attendees, confirming they had seen me escort Emma back to the hotel alone. an action born out of necessity, not desire. Despite my desperate appeals, Rachel declared her desire for a divorce. And amidst the chaos of insults and recriminations, I was summarily expelled from my own home. The ensuing months plunged me into a harrowing ordeal. Forced to resign from my job amidst the scandal that engulfed me, life became a relentless onslaught of hatred and condemnation. In our tight-knit community, where everyone knew everyone else, the venom directed at me manifested not only in verbal assaults but also in physical attacks. My own family disowned me, branding me a disgrace, while my siblings echoed the sentiments of rejection and insult. Rachel's family mirrored this hostility, severing all ties and refusing to acknowledge my existence. Even attempts to seek solace from friends were met with rejection. During this tumultuous period, my brother Lewis's behavior stood out, as he made cryptic remarks that hinted at his involvement in comforting Rachel during the divorce proceedings, an unsettling revelation I would later uncover. The divorce proceedings dragged on for a year, during which I was prohibited from any direct contact with Rachel, all communication filtered through legal channels. In 2006, the grueling process concluded, leaving me stripped of nearly everything. Adultery carried severe consequences in our jurisdiction, resulting in substantial financial penalties. While I managed to evade alimony payments through legal negotiations, the fallout still saw me relinquishing my home, car, 80% of my savings, and a hefty compensation sum of $160,000. With the ink barely dry on the divorce decree, both my family and Rachel's family cut all remaining ties. The last morsel of information I gleaned was the disquieting news that my brother Lewis had begun a relationship with Rachel. At that juncture, my world lay in ruins. Bereft of family, friends, and reputation, I found myself ostracized by the very community I once called home. Job prospects evaporated as I became a pariah in the eyes of those around me. The weight of despair bore heavily upon me, leading me to contemplate ending my own life, though ultimately I lacked the courage to follow through. Instead, I made the decision to liquidate what little remained of my possessions and depart from that place. Seeking solace in distance, I resettled in a city 6 hours away, nestled in the northern reaches of Mexico. With meager funds at my disposal, I embarked on a journey of survival, taking up menial jobs to eke out a living. In due time, I discerned an opportunity amidst the challenges that surrounded me, observing a demand for tax guidance and audit assistance among local businesses. I began offering my expertise in these areas. This newfound venture marked the genesis of a small yet moderately successful consulting and financial advisory firm by 2007. However, despite this semblance of economic stability, I grappled with profound emotional turmoil, plagued by issues of confidence and self-worth. It was only when I attained a measure of financial security that I could afford to seek therapy, a decision that proved instrumental in confronting and overcoming my emotional demons. With the guidance of my therapist, I delved into various facets of my past experiences, addressing my familial dynamics, friendships, and the complexities of my former marriage. Wrestling with feelings of self-blame and bewilderment over the betrayal, I found solace in exploring the underlying causes of my ordeal, ultimately receiving a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder exacerbated by an anxiety disorder. Acknowledging that I was not culpable for the events that transpired, I embarked on a journey of healing. Through dedication to physical fitness, newfound hobbies like gardening and kickboxing, and a steadfast focus on my professional endeavors, I gradually reclaimed control over my life. While the specter of betrayal still lingered, I found solace in forming new connections, aided by the understanding and empathy of newfound friends. Over the course of the subsequent years, my small consultancy experienced significant growth, alleviating financial concerns and affording me a sense of stability. Emotionally, I found myself in a much healthier place as my confidence flourished and my fear of social interaction gradually waned. Encircled by understanding companions who accepted me for who I was, I finally attained a sense of peace and acceptance within myself. The year 2009 marked a pivotal moment for my growing company, necessitating the expansion of our personnel, particularly in the accounting department. Amidst the influx of job applications, one name caught my attention: Lily, a curious coincidence given my past acquaintance with someone of the same name. However, the realization dawned upon me during the interview that this Lily was none other than my ex-wife's twin sister. Despite the initial discomfort evoked by memories of the past, I conducted the interview with professionalism, ultimately recognizing Lily's exceptional qualifications for the position. Setting aside personal history, I extended her an offer, which she accepted, joining our team shortly thereafter. Initially, our interactions remained strictly professional, limited to work-related matters. In the ensuing months, Lily maintained a reserved demeanor, focusing solely on her tasks and avoiding social interactions. However, as the workload increased, she volunteered to assist with overtime projects, a gesture I gratefully accepted. As Lily and I found ourselves spending more time together during overtime hours, our interactions remained largely silent until she nervously extended an invitation for a drink one evening. Though initially hesitant, I accepted, feeling the weight of stress bearing down on me. While our outing was unremarkable, it provided a welcome respite, paving the way for renewed camaraderie. Over time, our formal friendship blossomed, marked by candid conversations, shared lunch breaks, and Friday evening drinks reminiscent of old times. During one such outing, I confided in Lily about the tumultuous events surrounding my divorce for Rachel, including the betrayal by Emma and the subsequent fallout with our families. Lily, visibly taken aback, questioned whether a single lie warranted such severe consequences. Her empathy and willingness to listen provided solace, lifting a burden I had long carried alone. Despite her remarkable contributions to the company, I couldn't shake the feeling that something troubled Lily. Sensing her struggles with teamwork and interpersonal dynamics, I broached the subject with her, offering a supportive ear. In time, Lily confided in me, revealing the circumstances that led to her arrest and imprisonment. Lily's employment at the bank in our former city shed light on the events leading to her arrest. Initially tasked with routine accounting duties, she eventually gained access to a significant database containing detailed client information, enhancing her efficiency. However, alongside another colleague, she found herself embroiled in a dire situation when numerous account holders reported drained savings and missing funds. Investigations revealed a sinister plot orchestrated by a criminal syndicate, likely associated with local cartels. Exploiting the Access database, they systematically emptied multiple accounts, triggering widespread panic and prompting the bank to enforce a temporary freeze, known colloquially as a corralito. Despite efforts to recover the stolen funds and subsequent arrests, some perpetrators managed to evade capture, leaving a trail of financial devastation in their wake. Lily found herself ensnared in the web of suspicion during the investigation, with her and her co-worker emerging as prime suspects due to their access to the incriminating database. However, her colleagues' abrupt resignation and subsequent disappearance left Lily isolated as the sole target of scrutiny. The criminals implicated her as an accomplice, alleging that someone within the bank facilitated their nefarious scheme. Despite protestations of innocence, Lily was ultimately deemed guilty, bearing the brunt of blame for the financial debacle. It's plausible that she served as a convenient scapegoat to expedite closure on the case, a tactic not uncommon in the murky realm of law enforcement in Mexico. Amidst the ordeal, Lily faced betrayal on multiple fronts, most notably from her own family. Tensions within her familial relationships exacerbated the situation, particularly with her mother, who staunchly refused to believe in her innocence. Tanya's condemnation, coupled with the irrevocable severance of familial ties, plunged Lily into profound despair, leaving her utterly abandoned and shattered. As Lily's story unfolded, I found myself grappling with a mix of guilt and empathy, realizing the depth of the injustice she endured. She reassured me that my absence wasn't by choice, as her mother, Tanya, wielded strict control over her communication, denying any attempts at contact. Despite my sincere apologies, Lily absolved me of blame, recognizing the constraints imposed upon our interactions. Curiosity led me to inquire about her eventual release from prison, to which she recounted a breakthrough stemming from the arrest of an escaped accomplice. This individual, seeking leniency, provided crucial information that exonerated Lily, revealing her former partner's true involvement in the criminal enterprise. With insufficient evidence to implicate her, Lily was vindicated and released, her record cleared of any wrongdoing. However, the aftermath of her incarceration proved equally harrowing. Rejection permeated every facet of her life, as family and friends turned their backs on her, refusing to acknowledge her innocence. Attempts to secure employment were thwarted by the stain of her previous ordeal, forcing her to relocate in search of a fresh start. Yet the scars of her trauma lingered, manifesting in difficulty forming connections, trust issues, and haunting nightmares from her time behind bars. It was a poignant moment of empathy as I witnessed the toll Lily's experiences had taken on her. Determined to support her on her path to healing, I suggested therapy, offering to cover the expenses as a gesture of apology for my past absence. Initially hesitant, Lily eventually relented, agreeing to attend sessions with the same therapist I was seeing. Her diagnosis of post-traumatic stress syndrome, depression, anxiety, confidence disorders, and sleeping problems underscored the depth of her struggles. Accompanying her to therapy sessions, I witnessed her gradual transformation as she engaged in healing practices and adhered to prescribed treatments, including antidepressants and participation in a program for conscientious objectors with prison backgrounds. As Lily's journey toward recovery unfolded, I found solace in witnessing her gradual emergence from the shadows of her trauma. Her once pervasive fears and anxieties began to wane, replaced by newfound confidence and a willingness to connect with others. Together, we embarked on physical activities like gym workouts and kickboxing classes, fostering camaraderie and mutual growth as we navigated life's challenges side by side. As 2012 unfolded, Lily and I found ourselves drawn closer together, both in our professional endeavors and personal interactions. In the workplace, Lily seamlessly assumed the role of my trusted confidant, becoming an indispensable asset to our company. On a personal level, our bond deepened as we shared moments of leisure, leaning on each other for support during our respective therapy sessions. However, amidst this growing closeness, I found myself grappling with unexpected emotions. Despite my initial trepidation, I gradually realized that my feelings for Lily transcended mere friendship. Yet, haunted by past heartbreak and wary of repeating history, I hesitated to acknowledge these burgeoning sentiments, fearing they were merely a manifestation of unresolved issues from my previous relationship. After seeking counsel from both my therapist and trusted friends, I confronted my fears and confronted my feelings head-on. It became clear to me that my affection for Lily stemmed from a genuine appreciation of her unique qualities and character, rather than a subconscious desire to reclaim the past. Summoning courage, I chose a moment outside the confines of our usual routine to lay bare my heart to Lily. I poured out my emotions, expressing how profoundly she had touched my life and how my feelings for her had blossomed into something deeper and more profound. In that poignant moment, Lily's tears mirrored my own, and her vulnerability laid bare the depth of her emotions. As she hesitantly sought confirmation of my feelings, I felt a surge of anxiety, fearing rejection. Yet, with unwavering conviction, I affirmed the sincerity of my affection. Her initial reaction was one of guarded apprehension, but soon, a wave of raw emotion swept over us both. In a heartfelt confession, Lily revealed that her feelings for me had blossomed in the warmth of my care and support. She spoke of the profound impact I had made on her life, painting a picture of loneliness punctuated by my steadfast presence. Amidst tears and embraces, Lily bared her soul, laying bare her fears and insecurities. She had harbored doubts, afraid of rejection and hesitant to risk her heart once more. Yet, as she found solace in my embrace, I vowed to stand by her side, unconditionally, offering reassurance and unwavering support. In a moment of shared vulnerability, we made a silent pact to weather whatever storms lay ahead, finding solace in each other's love and unwavering commitment. Together, we forged a bond built on trust, understanding, and the promise of a brighter future. From that pivotal moment forward, Lily and I embarked on a journey together, navigating the complexities of our shared past and the challenges of forging a new future. Despite initial hurdles stemming from our individual traumas and fears, we made a conscious decision not to let our past dictate our happiness. Our relationship was a gradual process, marked by moments of tension and doubt as we confronted our trust issues and fears of betrayal. Yet, fueled by our deep bond and unwavering commitment to one another, we found the strength and clarity needed to confront and overcome our inner demons. In early 2015, Lily and I exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony, opting for a small gathering with only our closest companions. Purposefully excluding our families from the guest list, we sought the counsel of our therapist in making this decision, ultimately prioritizing our own emotional well-being. Set against the backdrop of a picturesque beach, our wedding was a celebration of love and resilience. With the soothing melody of the waves and the golden hues of the sunset as our witnesses, we sealed our union in the presence of 15 cherished friends, including our therapist and his wife. One of the most cherished memories from our wedding was witnessing Lily's graceful walk down the aisle, adorned in her exquisite wedding gown. However, the moment etched deepest in my heart is the look on her face as I slipped the ring onto her finger, a testament to the trials and triumphs we endured to reach that milestone. Words failed to capture the overwhelming joy I felt, seeing her radiant smile illuminate the moment. Just a few weeks after our nuptials, we received the joyous news of Lily's pregnancy. A delightful surprise that filled us initially with nervous anticipation, soon replaced by boundless excitement and gratitude. Embracing this new chapter as the dawn of our shared journey, we welcome the prospect of parenthood with open arms, brimming with hope for our future together. The arrival of Alba in late 2015 brought an indescribable joy to our lives. Holding her in our arms for the first time, experiencing the tender bond of skin-to-skin contact, was a profound moment that filled our hearts with overwhelming love and awe. Witnessing her nestled in Lily's embrace, I was overcome with emotions that words fail to capture adequately. In the initial months, as any new parents would attest, we faced the challenges of sleepless nights, round-the-clock care, and the demands of caring for a newborn. Despite the exhaustion and inevitable trials, we poured our hearts into nurturing Alba, ensuring she received the love, attention, and care she deserved. Our home was filled with the laughter and joy of friends and family eager to meet our precious addition, providing a supportive network during those early days. As the years passed, Lily and I devoted ourselves to fostering a nurturing environment for Alba's growth and development. Despite the juggling act of balancing work and parenting, we prioritized quality time with our daughter, striving to instill values of love, respect, and trust from her earliest days. Our journey as a family was marked by shared moments of laughter, learning, and boundless love, laying the foundation for a bright and promising future for our little Alba. Coming to the present day, I am delighted to share that I am now the proud father of a charming 7-year-old daughter, and I am blessed with the most wonderful wife I could have ever hoped for. As you followed through my narrative, the journey has been anything but smooth sailing, peppered with both triumphs and tribulations over the years. Yet, amidst the challenges, I wouldn't alter a single aspect of my life. Surrounded by exceptional individuals who have stood by me through thick and thin, I find myself content beyond measure. You might be curious to know that there's more to our story. Since last year, both Lily and I have reestablished contact with our respective families. However, I chose not to delve into this aspect earlier, as I felt the narrative had already grown quite lengthy. I am truly grateful for the unwavering support that the initial publication received, albeit it being deleted. Looking ahead, I am eager to continue sharing our journey and updating you on the developments that unfolded in 2022 and thus far in 2023. My wife and daughter left me when I got very sick. Years later, they came back to take over my house, but let me tell you what happened from the start. First, I found out I had a serious illness called advanced Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was a shock because I've always been healthy. I ate well, stayed active, and went to the doctor regularly. The doctor said they didn't know exactly why I got sick, but there was a small chance I could survive with tough treatment. When I told my wife, Daisy, and our daughter, Luna, they were really upset. I promised them I would fight the illness with everything I had, but I worried about how it would change our family. The doctor said the treatment would be hard, and some marriages don't make it through. That night, I talked to my wife about my worries. She promised she would stay with me and help me through everything. Luckily, we were in a good financial situation. We had good insurance, savings, and money from my late grandfather. Our house was paid off, and I had money saved for Luna's college. I started chemotherapy a week later. It was really tough. When I came home, I felt exhausted. I could barely do anything, not even take care of myself. But my wife and daughter took care of me. They cooked, cleaned, drove me to the hospital, and made sure I had my medicine. I tried not to ask too much of them because I didn't want to be a burden. This went on for 2 hard months. However, things started to get tense with my wife and daughter. They seemed reluctant to help me, and my daughter stopped responding when I asked for simple things like water or some fresh air. One day, I had an early appointment for treatment, and my wife hadn't come downstairs. When I asked her about it, she just told me to take an Uber because she was tired. It was surprising and upsetting, but I didn't know what else to do, so I called for an Uber and asked the hospital for help. Luckily, the Uber driver was really kind and made sure I got to the hospital safely. When I got back home, things hadn't gotten any better. So I finally gathered the courage to talk to my wife and daughter about their behavior. They admitted they were feeling overwhelmed, and my daughter said she didn't expect me to need so much help. I suggested hiring a nurse to assist me with daily tasks and take me to my appointments. They agreed, and we found a nurse who was really helpful. But even with the nurse, my wife and daughter still seemed unhappy. My wife felt like the nurse was taking her place. I offered to let my wife take over the nurse's responsibilities if she was willing to do everything the nurse did. She agreed, but wasn't happy about it. She even suggested getting a male nurse, but there weren't any available. I tried to explain that the nurse was chosen because she had experience with patients like me. Despite my efforts to help, my wife was still upset. She thought I should be doing more for myself instead of relying on everyone else. I tried to explain that there were days when I could barely move because of the treatment, but she didn't seem to understand. Later, my mother-in-law called and complained about having another woman in her daughter's house. But technically, the house was mine before we got married. But I chose to handle the situation calmly. I explained to my mother-in-law that I needed more help than her daughter could give me, so I had to bring in a nurse to ease the burden on my family. I assured her that the nurse would only be there temporarily for the rest of my chemotherapy treatments, unless my condition got worse. She wasn't completely convinced, but she eventually left me alone. For about a week after that, things seemed normal. My treatment was going well. Then, one day after coming back from chemotherapy, I saw a moving truck outside my house. My wife and daughter had packed up and said they were going to stay with their mother. I was hurt and upset, but I was too tired to express how I felt properly. It felt especially cruel that they left right after my chemo sessions when I was at my weakest. I asked my daughter if this was what she really wanted. She said she'd rather live with her mother because it was too hard to live with me. It was heartbreaking to watch them leave, tears filling my eyes. It was exactly what I had feared when my chemo started, feeling unwanted and abandoned. In the midst of my sadness, my brother stepped in. He noticed the nurse spending extra time with me and asked if I had any family nearby who could help. My brother lived 3 hours away and had his own kids, but he offered to help. But he generously offered to take time off work to stay with me until I found a more permanent solution. When he arrived, he was angry about what my wife had done, calling her selfish and ungrateful. He pointed out that she never had to work since we got married, and had always made sure she had everything she needed. My brother could only stay for a week, but he had another idea. His wife's sister, Kara, was going through a tough divorce and needed a safe place to stay temporarily. Her soon-to-be ex-husband was the main breadwinner, leaving her with limited money. Kara was also studying nearby on a scholarship. My house was close to her university, making it a good option. I wouldn't be alone, and she would have a safe place away from her difficult situation. I agreed to let Kara stay without paying rent since she'd be helping me out. She could choose any bedroom she wanted. My wife and daughter had taken most of the stuff, leaving just the bed and a few clothes. My brother helped Kara move in, and she promised to be helpful and considerate. I told her she wouldn't need to do too much since my nurse would be coming more often now. In the following weeks, things went smoothly. I missed my wife and daughter, but they didn't even bother to check up on me. Kara was a huge help, taking care of groceries, cleaning, and cooking without complaining. About a month and a half after my wife left, I got the news that I was cancer-free. It was a big moment, celebrated at the hospital by ringing a bell. My nurse asked what I wanted to do next, now that I was cured. I decided to file for divorce, freeing myself from a marriage that hadn't supported me during my illness. With the divorce process started, I focused on recovering from cancer. It was a slow journey, but I started to feel stronger. My hair grew back, my scar healed, and I gained weight. I stuck to a healthy diet mostly but treated myself occasionally to the foods I missed. It's been 6 months since I was declared cancer-free, and I'm ready to move on. My old job is willing to rehire me for remote work, so I'm thinking of taking that and moving away. While I'm attached to my house, it holds too many painful memories. I want a fresh start, and I plan to give the house to Kara. She's been there for me when I needed it most. When I was at my lowest, Kara showed immense kindness, even though we were practically strangers. She's free to sell the house if she wants. I don't want anything to do with it, especially if it means my wife or daughter could claim it. My new place is in a quiet countryside neighborhood, and I'm eagerly looking forward to this new beginning. Update number 1. Hey wife and daughter. It's been over a year since my diagnosis, and I've settled into my new place nicely. I've made friends with my neighbors, including Sophia, who lives across the way. She's a widow who invited me over for drinks and shared her story of losing her husband to cancer. She emphasized the importance of life insurance. I'd opened up about what happened with my wife and daughter, but surprisingly, I still haven't heard from them. I've been pursuing new hobbies, like woodworking, and I'm starting to build up a collection of tools. One day, Sophia noticed some people hanging around my house who matched the description of my wife and daughter. It left me wondering why they were looking for me. Sophia assured me she'd handle it if they returned, and I had no desire to interact with them after they abandoned me. Later, I found out they had been harassing Kara and her roommate at my old house. Fortunately, Kara had proof that the house was hers now, and she explained she had bought it for me. I felt bad and apologized to Kara. Hopefully, I can resolve the situation for good if they come back. As for my wife, I'm not sure if she's aware of the divorce papers. I've reached a point where I don't care anymore. Update number 2. My wife and daughter showed up at the house again. Once again, my wife and daughter showed up at the house, but this time it was earlier in the day while I was working. I heard the knock and decided to check the security cameras, and indeed, it was them. My ex-wife looked just as I remembered, but Luna had grown significantly. She was practically a young woman now. I followed the plan Sophia and I had discussed, staying inside but moving closer to the door to hear them better. Sophia, being the good neighbor she is, came over to greet them and introduced herself. My wife asked if she knew a man named Charlie who used to live there. Sophia sounded just as baffled as I was and questioned her use of used to. My wife explained that her husband, not ex-husband, had lived in this house before his recent untimely death following an extended hospital stay. My jaw dropped at this revelation because, to my knowledge, there was no record of my death anywhere, especially not at the hospital where I underwent treatment. My wife went on to claim that they were the next of kin, implying that the home was rightfully theirs. Sophia informed them that someone named Charlie did live there for a while but clarified that he was a divorcee. She also shared that during our time as neighbors, I had informed her that my wife had left me, and I had filed for a unilateral divorce. Sophia added that as far as she knew, I intended to bequeath all my assets to charity since I had no other family besides my brother. This was why she found it strange to see two women snooping around my house. The conversation fell into an uncomfortable silence before Sophia inquired if they had a death certificate or a will. They replied in the negative. Sophia explained that once they had those documents, they could take them to the county's record office. If they were indeed the rightful owners of the property, they could then get the deed in their name. My wife did not take kindly to this suggestion. She asked Sophia who she thought she was and started screaming, asserting that Sophia had no authority to interfere in her affairs. She also accused Sophia of being nosy and demanded that she mind her own business. I felt a deep sense of embarrassment. The people in this neighborhood had been nothing but kind to me, and here my ex-wife was making a scene and disturbing their peace. Part of me wanted to go out there and give her a piece of my mind. Despite the chaos, I chose to stick with our plan. Sophia, bless her heart, apologized to them and explained that she was merely trying to be helpful. After they left, I went over to Sophia's place to apologize. She brushed it off, mentioning that while she found my wife's behavior repulsive, she also found the outbursts somewhat amusing. My wife came back again yesterday. I was working in my home office when I heard a loud crash. Rushing out to the living room, I found my front window smashed, and my neighbors were outside trying to stop her. Apparently, she had been causing a ruckus for a while, but I hadn't heard it because I had noise-canceling headphones on. Both my ex-wife and daughter were holding bats, and they had already broken a few of my plants. I asked her if she had lost her marbles and told her to get off my property before I called the cops. Unbeknownst to me, my neighbors had already placed the call. She seemed hurt by my words and asked why I hadn't contacted her after I got better. She insisted that she and Luna would have come back. I told her that we made vows to stand by each other in sickness and health, and she broke those vows. I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. She asked about Luna and mentioned that she's going to college next year and can't afford tuition on her own. I replied that her daughter was fine with abandoning me too, and I'm ready to give up all my parental rights. I don't want anything to do with either of them. After hearing that, she swung at me with a bat just as the cops showed up. They immediately arrested both her and my daughter. They asked if I wanted to press charges, and of course I did. After work, I ordered a new window and cleaned up the glass. Sophia gave me some buckets to put my plants in until I can replace the pots. Curious about what brought my ex-wife back, I did some digging. It turns out her mom passed away 2 months ago, and they found out the house they had been staying in didn't belong to her or her husband. With both of my ex-wife's parents now gone, she and our daughter sold most of their belongings and had been living in a motel. When they came back to our old home and saw Kara there, they assumed I had died and went snooping around for recordings of my assets and purchases, which is how they found me. Regardless, they're facing charges of vandalism, attempted break-in, and attempted assault. Since Luna is a minor, she's receiving community service, but my ex-wife is facing time behind bars as this was clearly premeditated. I'm considering obtaining a restraining order as well. At least for now, I won't have to worry about her for a good long while. Hi, I'm Anna. Something big happened in my life. 5 years into my marriage with Paul, we were like any other couple. I worked as a teacher, and he was a manager at an energy company. Life was going smoothly, but then his dad passed away, leaving his mom Elaine all alone in their big family house. That's when Paul dropped a bombshell on me. Anna, we need to talk. Paul said suddenly one night, looking serious. His tone made me stop scrolling on my phone and pay attention. What's wrong? Is everything okay? I asked, concerned. It's about Mom. She's alone in that old house since Dad passed. I think we should move in with her, he said, taking a deep breath. My stomach sank. Move in with Elaine? Paul? And I didn't always get along with her. Paul, are you serious? You know Elaine and I barely get along, I protested. He leaned against the kitchen counter, looking determined. I know, but she's my mom, and she's struggling. Plus, we're just wasting money on this rented apartment. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. But this is our space, our home. Moving in with your mom is a big change. It's not just about the space, Anna. It's about family. Mom needs us, he pleaded. I felt trapped. Does your mom need us, or do you need your mom? I asked, biting my lip. That's not fair, Anna. I'm not asking you to live in a dump. It's a huge house, plenty of room for all of us, he argued. I crossed my arms, feeling tense. And what about our life here? Just uproot everything because Elaine snaps her fingers. It's not like that, and you know it. I'm thinking about what's best for everyone, he said firmly. Everyone, or just Elaine? I retorted. He threw his hands up in frustration. Can't you see the bigger picture here, Anna? I am looking at the bigger picture, Paul. Our life, our independence, not just pretending to be a happy family in that gloomy old house of hers, I shot back. The argument continued in circles, but eventually I gave in, for Paul's sake and for the sake of peace. But deep down, I dreaded every bit of it. Moving day came, and it was just as uncomfortable as I imagined. Elaine's house was this imposing old structure with echoing rooms and a constant chill in the air. Elaine greeted us with a stiff smile. Welcome to my home. I expect you to respect my ways, she said. I forced a smile, trying to keep the peace. Of course, Elaine. We appreciate you letting us stay. Living with Elaine was like living with a hawk. She had a comment for everything. Don't put the dishes away like that. Or you're overwatering the plants, she'd say. It was relentless. One night, after a particularly harsh critique on my cooking, I exploded to Paul in our room. I can't do a damn thing right for your mother. It's like living with a drill sergeant, I vented. Paul rubbed his temples, looking equally frustrated. Anna, just give it time. She's old and set in her ways, he said. I threw my hands up. Great, so we just tiptoe around her till the end of time? He didn't have an answer, and honestly, neither did I. This house, with its constant surveillance and Elaine's scrutinizing eyes, was suffocating. Life in Elaine's house was turning into a daily grind. Just when I thought I could handle it, Paul dropped another bombshell. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I was trying to find some peace in the garden when he came out. Anna, we need to talk, Paul said, leaning on the garden gate. I looked up, feeling a knot in my stomach. What now, Paul? I asked. He took a deep breath. I think you should quit your job and stay home. We're spending a fortune on a nurse and housekeeper for Mom. It makes more sense. I stood up, anger rising. Quit my job, Paul. I love teaching. It's not just about the money, I protested. He ran his hand through his hair, his tone getting edgy. I know, but think about it. It'll make things easier around here. I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. So what? I just become a full-time maid and nurse? That's not the life I want. Paul's voice rose. It's not about what we want, Anna. It's about what's practical. My mom needs us. I glared at him. No, your mom needs you. I didn't sign up to be her caretaker, I shot back. Well, things change, Anna. We need to adapt, he replied firmly. That word felt like a slap. I loved my job, my independence. This wasn't adapting. This was sacrificing. You know what, Paul? Fine, I'll do it. But don't expect me to be happy about it, I conceded. He sighed, a look of relief crossing his face. Thank you, Anna. It means a lot. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like I was losing a part of myself. Quitting my job was hard, but the days that followed were even harder. I was now a full-time housekeeper, nurse, and cook. Elaine, as always, had her 2 cents to add about everything. Those curtains need a wash, she'd say, or the soup is too salty. It was endless. One day, I snapped. Elaine was criticizing the way I ironed her clothes, and I couldn't take it anymore. Elaine, can you just stop? I'm doing my best here, I explained. She looked taken aback. Well, I'm sorry if I have standards, Anna, she retorted. I threw the iron down, my voice shaking with frustration. I'm not your servant, Elaine. I'm your son's wife. I'm here trying to help, and all you do is criticize me. There was a moment of tense silence, and then Elaine's expression softened slightly. I know you're trying, Anna. I'm just used to things a certain way, she admitted. From that day on, things were slightly better. Elaine toned down her criticisms, and I tried to accommodate her quirks. It was a fragile truce, but it was better than the constant battles. As time dragged on in Elaine's house, the atmosphere grew tenser, almost suffocating. Paul's behavior became increasingly distant and elusive. He was always late from work, and when he was home, he might as well have been invisible, retreating to the spare room like it was his sanctuary. One evening, unable to bear the silence and distance anymore, I cornered him in the kitchen. Paul, what's going on with you? You're hardly here? And when you are, it's like you're not even my husband anymore, I confronted him. He'd avoided eye contact, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. Work's a nightmare right now, Anna. Just piles of stress, he mumbled. I leaned back against the counter, my arms folded. I get stressed, Paul, but this feels like you're shutting me out. You're here, but you're not really here, I insisted. He exhaled heavily, his gaze still fixed on his coffee. I don't know what you want me to say, Anna. I'm just really tied up with stuff. I wanted to believe him, to understand, but something inside me screamed that there was more to it. Then there was Lucy, Paul's sister, who made it her mission to add to the tension. Each visit from her was a trial. She'd look around the house with a sneer and quip, still stuck in this old don't pa. I usually bit my tongue, but one day her taunts hit a nerve. Not all of us have the luxury to mooch off others. Lucy, I shot back. She just cackled, her voice grating on my nerves. Oh, look at you, playing the martyr in a haunted house. Pathetic, she sneered. I clenched my jaw, holding back a barrage of words. Paul, ever the silent bystander, offered no defense. His silence was like another jab, another confirmation of the growing gulf between us. The biggest shift, however, came with Elaine. One day, she called for Lucy, her voice frail and desperate. Lucy, I need help with the bath. I can't manage on my own anymore. Lucy's response was cold and cutting. Help yourself, Mom. I'm not your caretaker. Elaine broke down in tears, and my heart couldn't take it. Despite our rocky history, I couldn't leave Elaine in that state. I helped her with the bath, and something between us changed that day. Elaine started to warm up to me, treating me less like an intruder and more like a daughter. It was a welcome change, but it also highlighted how far Paul and I had drifted apart. The house felt colder, emptier despite Elaine's newfound warmth towards me. The walls seemed to echo with the growing silence between Paul and me, a chasm that widened with each passing day. Paul's late nights at work became the norm, and our conversations turned into mere whispers of their former selves. It was during one of these fleeting interactions that Paul dropped a new piece of news that would add to the growing pile of secrets and lies. Anna, I got an apartment near work, he said nonchalantly. I almost dropped the dish I was cleaning. An apartment? Why on earth would you need that? I asked, bewildered. He leaned against the doorframe, avoiding my gaze. It's just practical, Anna. Saves me the commute, especially with the late nights, he explained. I felt a surge of anger and confusion. And you just decided this without talking to me? What are we, roommates now? His indifference cut deep. I thought you'd be happy. Less stress about me coming home late, he said dismissively. I shook my head in disbelief. Happy, Paul? This feels like you're living a double life. What's next? You'll tell me you have a second family? He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Don't be dramatic, Anna. It's not like that. The true shock came a few days later in a candid conversation with Elaine. We were in the living room sharing a rare moment of calm when she suddenly said, You know, Paul didn't buy that apartment with his money. I looked at her, puzzled. What do you mean? She hesitated, then continued. He used my savings. He said it was an investment. He even put it in my name. My heart sank. He's been using your money, and you're okay with this? Elaine shrugged, a sad look in her eyes. I couldn't say no. He's my son, but I thought you should know. I was speechless. Paul's secret apartment was one thing, but using his mother's savings under the guise of an investment felt like a betrayal. A few days later, I confronted Paul about it. Paul, why didn't you tell me the apartment was bought with your mom's money? I demanded. He was unapologetic, almost defiant. Because I knew you'd react like this. It's an investment, Anna. It's not a big deal. I couldn't believe his audacity. Not a big deal? You're gambling with your mom's savings and keeping it from me. What else are you hiding? He turned away, ending the conversation with a dismissive wave. You wouldn't understand, Anna. It's business. That word felt like a chasm between us, an excuse for everything that was going wrong in our marriage. Living in Elaine's old, dreary house was taking its toll on me. The walls, once probably vibrant, now echoed a somber tone, and every creaking floorboard seemed to whisper secrets. One day, I just couldn't take it anymore. Elaine, have you ever thought about renovating the house? I asked over breakfast. It could use some freshening up. Elaine looked up from her tea, surprised. Renovate, family. How can you say that? I demanded, my voice trembling with disbelief. He shrugged, his indifference piercing through me like a knife. Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the cherry on top. I couldn't hide my disgust. She's not a burden, Paul. She's family. How can you say that? I demanded, my voice shaking with emotion. He didn't even look at me, his eyes distant. Anna, I can't deal with this. I have enough on my plate, he said, his tone cold. I was stunned. You can't deal with this, Paul? She's your mother, I reminded him, my voice filled with incredulity. He shrugged, his response cutting like a knife. Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the cherry on top. I couldn't hide my disgust. She's not a burden, Paul. She's family. How can you say that? I demanded, my voice trembling with disbelief. He shrugged, his indifference piercing through me like a knife. Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the cherry on top. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could he be so callous, so heartless towards his own mother? But as much as his words hurt, they'd also made something clear to me. The gap between us wasn't just widening. It was becoming a vast, impassable chasm. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits, consultations with doctors, and making arrangements for Elaine's care. Through it all, Paul remained distant, consumed by his own concerns and unwilling to lend a helping hand. It was a difficult time, but I couldn't abandon Elaine, not when she needed me the most. So I threw myself into caring for her, spending long hours by her bedside, holding her hand and trying to provide whatever comfort I could. But as much as I tried to focus on Elaine's needs, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that gnawed at me. How could Paul turn his back on his own mother, especially when she needed him the most? And what did that say about our own relationship? The answers to those questions came in the days and weeks that followed, as Elaine's condition continued to deteriorate, and the strain on our marriage became impossible to ignore. Paul's indifference turned into resentment, and our once solid foundation began to crumble beneath us. In the end, it was clear that we had both changed, that the people we had once been were now just distant memories. And as I sat by Elaine's bedside, watching over her in her final days, I couldn't help but wonder what had become of the love that had once bound us together. She's family. She needs us, I insisted, hoping to appeal to Paul's sense of duty. His laugh was bitter. Us? No, Anna. She needs you. I've got other things to handle, he said callously. I was left speechless, my respect for him sinking as his indifference became more apparent. I took it upon myself to care for Elaine. It was hard watching the once strong woman confined to a bed, dependent for every little thing. As I became Elaine's primary caregiver, Paul's visits grew rarer, and his indifference more apparent. His visits were short, his conversations with Elaine brief and superficial. Then Lucy came. I overheard them in the living room, their words like venom. "We should start thinking about the will, dividing the assets," Lucy said coldly. I burst into the room, fury coursing through my veins. "How can you be so heartless, discussing her will right in front of her?" I demanded. Lucy smirked, her words sharp. "Oh, look who's talking. The saintly daughter-in-law. This is our family's matter. Stay out of it," Paul chimed in, his voice laced with cynicism. "Anna, just drop it. It's practical to plan these things. No use pretending she's going to bounce back," he added callously. I was aghast at their cruelty. Practical? She's your mother, Paul. How can you be so callous? I protested. He shrugged, his reply cold and detached. "Life's callous, Anna. Better get used to it," he said dismissively. I turned away, my heart heavy with disgust. In the following weeks, I dedicated myself to Elaine's recovery. And to my surprise, she showed signs of improvement. It was a miracle to me, but a nuisance to Paul and Lucy. Their true colors were now vividly clear. Their mother's plight was nothing more than an inconvenience, a hurdle in their path of inheritance. The betrayal stung deep, not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a human being. Life had settled into a grim routine. Elaine's health was a constant roller coaster, with small victories overshadowed by the looming fear of the worst. Then it happened. Another stroke, more severe this time. The call from the hospital felt like a punch to the gut. Elaine didn't make it. The funeral was a somber affair. I stood beside the grave, my heart heavy, watching as people paid their respects. That's when Paul arrived, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize and two small kids clinging to her hands. "Who's she?" I whispered to myself, my eyes fixed on the unfamiliar woman. Paul approached, his expression unreadable. "Anna, this is Carol, my wife, and these are our kids," he announced. I felt like I had been slapped. "Your wife? When did this happen?" I demanded, unable to hide my shock. He shrugged, a coldness in his voice. "A while ago." "It's none of your business, Anna," he replied dismissively. I was speechless, my mind reeling. How could he? And during all this time with Elaine, Lucy was there too, her usual sneer in place. "Finally showing your true colors, Anna? It's a bit late for that," she taunted. I glared at her, my voice laced with contempt. "I was here for Elaine when you both abandoned her. Don't you dare judge me," I retorted. Paul interjected, eager to end the confrontation. "Let's just get this over with." "We have other matters to discuss," he said coldly. After the funeral ended and the gathering moved to Elaine's house for the will reading, Paul and Lucy were like vultures, eagerly awaiting their share. The lawyer began reading the will, and that's when the bombshell dropped. Everything, the house, the money, all of it was left to me. Paul's face went from smug to shocked in an instant. "What the hell? This can't be right." Lucy was fuming. She was our mother. How could she leave everything to this nobody? I stood there stunned, not sure how to feel. Happy? Vindicated? It all felt hollow. Paul turned to me, his voice filled with accusation. "You manipulated her, didn't you? Turned her against us." I shook my head, disbelief and anger mixing in my voice. "I did nothing but care for her, which is more than I can say for you." The lawyer intervened. Elaine was very clear in her will. Lucy was seething. "This is not the end. We'll contest this. There's no way we're letting her get away with this." As they left in a huff, I stood there alone in the house that was now legally mine. The walls that had witnessed so much pain, betrayal, and love. I looked around, feeling the weight of Elaine's last act of kindness and the burden of a broken family. The house felt different now, like it was echoing with Elaine's last wishes. I was sitting there, holding the will, still trying to get my head around everything. Elaine had left it all to me, and Paul and Lucy were raging mad about it. They came back the next day, all fired up. "You really think you can just take everything?" Paul burst out as soon as he stepped in. I looked up, tired but standing my ground. Elaine decided this, Paul. It was her choice. Lucy was red in the face, yelling, "You tricked a sick old lady. We won't let you get away with this." I stood up, fed up with their nonsense. Tricked? I was there for her, unlike you two. She chose to leave it to me. Paul was fuming. "So you think you've beaten us? You think you can just snatch everything away?" I let out a heavy sigh. "I didn't snatch anything, Paul. Elaine gave it to me because she knew I actually cared." Their yelling didn't stop, but it was just noise against the truth. I knew I was there for Elaine when they weren't. The lawyer showed up with a video Elaine had made. Her voice filled the room as she said it clear as day. "I left everything to Anna because she was like the daughter I never had. She was there when my own kids weren't. She deserves it all." The room went quiet. Paul looked like he'd been punched in the gut, and Lucy started crying, finally realizing what they had done. After that, Paul and Lucy left, and all their threats just fell flat. I was alone in the big house, surrounded by the past and thinking about the future. I decided to divorce Paul. It was tough, but it had to be done. He and his new family had to move to a rental place. Lucy had her own mess to deal with. Her debts and bad choices were catching up to her. As for me, I was standing in my new house, feeling sad but also kind of excited. Elaine's will wasn't just about the house and money. It was like she was telling me to be strong and make my own way. I decided to start over, use what Elaine left me to build something new for myself. The house, once a reminder of tough times, was now a place for new beginnings. My daughter came home from a Christmas party at my husband's family's house crying. When I asked her what happened, she gave me a present without saying anything. "Mom, look at this. Why do I have to deal with this?" she said. I was shocked when I opened the present and saw it wasn't something suitable for a child. I went to the police right away and asked them to find out who gave it to her. The police found out that Ed, someone from the party, did it. It caused a big fuss in the family, and Ed got in serious trouble. I'm in my 40s, and my husband, who is in his 30s, works at the same company as me. I started working at this company when I was in my mid-30s. At my old job, I decided to switch because my boss called me old-fashioned for not being married by 30. But at my current job, they care more about how well you work than how old you are or what gender you are. My husband, who is now my boss, took care of me when I first started. We got married quickly and now have a daughter in 3rd grade. She's quiet and loves to read, and she's kind to everyone. My husband's sister causes a lot of problems, and we don't get along. But I'm lucky to have a good relationship with my in-laws. My sister-in-law doesn't like that I'm older than my husband, and that we had a quick wedding. She used to make mean comments about my age and appearance, even though she used to visit us a lot when we first got married. She'd make fun of my body after having a baby and say hurtful things about getting older. Despite all that, I try to ignore her negativity. I often feel insecure because I'm older than my husband. I try not to let it bother me too much, but sometimes my sister-in-law's hurtful comments sting. Just before I was due to give birth, she announced her own pregnancy and had a quick wedding too. It seemed like she didn't care about anyone else's feelings. Thankfully, she stopped visiting when she moved away with my in-laws after getting married. I was relieved to be away from her sarcasm, and I could focus on preparing for childbirth. When I finally gave birth to my daughter, it was tough, but my husband's support gave me strength. Hearing our daughter's first cry was an emotional moment for both of us. 7 months later, my sister-in-law had a baby boy and started visiting us again, just to make mean comments. She even compared our children, saying ridiculous things like my daughter's skin would be wrinkled because I was older. I was too busy with my newborn to pay much attention to her remarks. But then she started taking things from our house without asking, like diapers and formula, and it baffled me. Eventually, she stopped coming when her husband's job moved them to another state. We had a peaceful time until our daughter started elementary school and found out her cousin, my sister-in-law's son, was in the same class. I knew then that my peace was over. Despite our rocky relationship, my daughter and her cousin got along well. My daughter, being older and kind-hearted, took care of him. They ended up in the same third-grade class, and one day my daughter won an award for her reading. During the break between summer and winter breaks, we visited my in-laws. There were relatives present who usually didn't get together, possibly because they heard about my daughter winning an award for her reading reflection. However, my sister-in-law wasn't happy that our family was getting so much attention. She accused my daughter of taking a book that was supposed to be for her son. In reality, they had just swapped books because they couldn't decide which one to read. After finishing both books, they discussed and decided which book report to write together. My nephew liked the book my daughter read first, so she let him have it. But my sister-in-law didn't believe this explanation. She started spreading rumors that I had helped my daughter with her writing competition by using a connection with one of the judges. These rumors made my daughter feel really down. She even stopped reading her favorite books. I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to talk to my in-laws about everything that had happened. But first, I confessed everything to my husband. It was the first time I told him about all the things his sister had done to me since we got married. My husband was furious and decided we should tell his parents together. They went to my sister-in-law's house and confronted her. She was surprised, but started resenting me even more. She called me names and accused me of acting like a victim. After that, she kept calling and leaving angry messages, but I ignored them. Eventually, the calls stopped. However, in December, a children's Christmas party was organized at my in-laws' house. It was the first time they had done something like that, and I wondered why they decided to do it this year. My daughter was thrilled to get an invitation to a Christmas party. She had fond memories of a party at her kindergarten and expected her elementary school to have one too. Unfortunately, her school didn't celebrate Christmas due to their stance on religious events. I thought it was a shame to miss out on such a festive occasion just because of religious reasons, but it seemed some parents were particular about it. So I suggested to my daughter that we have our own celebration at home. Last year, we had a great time exchanging gifts and enjoying each other's company. The invitation for the party at my in-laws' house mentioned bringing a gift within a $20 budget. My daughter and I went shopping together at a nearby mall to pick out the perfect present. She chose one of her favorite picture books, hoping to share her love for it with whoever received it at the party. We lived just a short bus ride away from my in-laws' house, so I let my mother-in-law know when my daughter was on her way. She kindly offered to pick her up from the bus stop. When she called to say my daughter had arrived safely, I felt relieved. However, my relief didn't last long. About 30 minutes later, I heard the front door open unexpectedly. It was a weekday, and my husband was at work. I was working from home because my daughter was on winter break. The sudden sound of the door opening startled me. I rushed to the entrance, alarmed by the unexpected noise, only to find my daughter sitting on the floor, crying. She handed me a gift-wrapped bag and said I would understand once I looked inside. As I opened it, I found a torn-up newspaper with my daughter's reading reflection printed on it, along with a message card written in red ink. The card warned that if we got too arrogant, our family would end up like the torn stuffed animal inside, which was covered in red ink that looked like blood splatters. It was clear this wasn't just a harmless prank. I couldn't believe my daughter would receive such a cruel gift by chance. When I asked her about it, she told me that my sister-in-law had prepared it specifically for her. This was supposed to be a child-focused Christmas party, and we had all agreed that adults wouldn't personally prepare gifts. That's why I didn't go with my daughter. But somehow, my sister-in-law managed to sneak in this malicious present. My confusion grew when I realized my mother-in-law hadn't mentioned my sister-in-law's presence. My mother-in-law had always encouraged us to inform her if her daughter did or said anything to upset us. I had even told my daughter to do the same. I tried to explain to my aunt what had happened, but she interrupted and said she didn't call for me. She mentioned that only children with a connection to missionary schools were allowed. My daughter asked what a missionary school was, and I struggled to find an answer. Recently, one of our relatives had gotten into a missionary school, which had become a big topic of discussion. My sister-in-law's son had also attended a missionary kindergarten. Hearing this, I realized that many of us had connections to such schools, even if we weren't aware of it. We had chosen to send our daughter to a local kindergarten and elementary school instead. It seemed like my sister-in-law was using this topic to criticize my daughter. I told my daughter to stay inside, and I rushed to the police station alone. I argued that the threatening gift was a serious matter. Although the police suggested resolving it within the family, I insisted that threats could be valid even among family members. I explained that the gift contained not only threatening words but also a mutilated stuffed animal, which I believed was a malicious act. Just then, a female police officer happened to pass by. She agreed that threats and violence within a family should be taken seriously. The female officer took charge and empathized with how scared my daughter and I must have been. After providing my sister-in-law's address, she promised to go and warn her right away. In the end, my wishes were fulfilled. I couldn't help but shudder at the thought of what might have happened if that police officer hadn't passed by. It was disheartening to realize that some in the police force wouldn't act unless it was an actual incident or accident. I wondered how I could protect my daughter in case of an emergency. That evening, when my husband returned from work, I told him everything that had happened. He was furious with his sister for ruining our daughter's fun out of spite. He immediately called his parents to protest. Since the Christmas party was happening at their house, they claimed they had no idea about it. They explained that they had left the back door unlocked, so my sister-in-law might have entered that way. My mother-in-law apologized for not paying attention to who was coming and going, as she was busy picking up other grandchildren nearby. My father-in-law had been away at work during the day. The Christmas party was mainly organized by the middle school-aged nephews and nieces, and my mother-in-law had mostly left it to them. The police officer had firmly warned my sister-in-law later on. From what I heard, she was told that any further reports could lead to more than just a warning, so things should be fine for the most part. However, my in-laws were distressed by my sister-in-law's actions, which had involved the police. It could potentially lead to criminal behavior. Consequently, they called a meeting with both our family and my sister-in-law's family, with the parents present, for discussion. When we arrived at my in-laws' house for the meeting, my sister-in-law and her husband hadn't shown up yet. They finally appeared right at the last minute, with my sister-in-law clearly sulking. It was obvious she wasn't remorseful and was resenting me for calling the police. Her husband, sitting next to her, looked clueless about why they were summoned. He seemed to have been called without being informed of the reason. During the discussion, he was shocked to hear for the first time about all the things his wife had done to our family, unaware that things had gotten to this point. My sister-in-law's husband profusely apologized to us, feeling sorry. My in-laws saw my sister-in-law's reaction and asked if she had anything to say. But all she replied with was, "Not really." She didn't seem to understand why she needed to apologize, acting as if she hadn't done anything wrong. She said, "I didn't do anything bad. The police came but didn't arrest me, right? So that means I didn't do anything wrong." Everyone else was shocked by her logic. It was like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. It felt like a waste of time just lecturing her. Then, out of nowhere, my sister-in-law's husband announced that he was divorcing her. We were all puzzled because it seemed like they had a good marriage. When we looked surprised, he confessed that he had reached his limit with her behavior. Since they got married, he hadn't complained about her not doing housework during pregnancy. He hadn't scolded her for neglecting childcare and going out to have fun, thinking it was just stress from being a new parent. But her carelessness with housework once led to a small fire, forcing them to move. She was also vain, insisting that their son attend a prestigious kindergarten when she heard other kids in the neighborhood were applying. However, he didn't get in due to lack of preparation, and embarrassed, she forced them to move again. Although his job did involve transfers, they weren't as frequent as their moves suggested. He revealed that the frequent moves were not just because of his job transfers. To maintain my sister-in-law's image, they moved frequently, especially after her son failed to get into a prestigious kindergarten. She tried to enroll him in an international kindergarten, But when that didn't work, they barely managed to get him into a missionary kindergarten. They only agreed on a public elementary school because their son wanted it. And my sister-in-law reluctantly complied after her husband supported their son's wishes. He was worried that her vanity would put their son's well-being at risk. He had been considering divorce for a while, but with her harassment becoming more apparent, he felt he had no choice but to announce it. My sister-in-law, somewhat aware of her actions, didn't dispute what he said, but seemed surprised by the divorce announcement. She started apologizing to us, thinking it would help. She claimed it was just a joke or a prank and never expected us to take it seriously. But I reminded her that her husband had criticized her, asking if she could say the same thing to her own child. Her actions were unimaginable for a parent. Just because someone is a parent doesn't mean they have parental feelings. There are people who can't be real parents, and she might be one of them. My husband, seeing her crying, told her sternly that crying wouldn't fix anything at her age. She needed to stop thinking tears would get her out of trouble. She cried even more, insisting she did nothing wrong and wasn't to blame. She felt everyone was ganging up on her, blaming her because her brother married an older woman. She argued that her marriage and her harassment were totally separate issues. We already thought she was a bit odd, but even my husband was astonished by her lack of understanding. No one tried to comfort her, as she seemed inconsolable. The discussion couldn't continue, so we decided to adjourn for the day. Her husband had to drag her to the car and take her home. Their divorce eventually happened, but it was messy because of her stubborn refusal to agree. Her son's accidental revelation might have been a factor in her agreeing to the divorce. He, without any malicious intent, shared what he saw with his friends. However, the parents who heard the rumor did not remain silent. After winter break at school, my nephew talked about having a Christmas party with his older cousins. It seems they used a class presentation to share their winter break memories. Among stories of New Year's Day and video game consoles as Christmas gifts, my mom gave my cousin a special present just for her. When the teacher asked what kind of present it was, my nephew described exactly what he saw. A cute stuffed animal all torn up with lots of red stuff on it, like blood. The story became a topic of discussion among the school teachers and escalated into a major issue after the children who heard it went home and told their parents. My daughter, still hurting, hasn't been able to go back to school since the Christmas party. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that my daughter and her cousin were related, so they speculated that her absence was related to the incident. Of course, that was the case, but I wished it had remained unnoticed and undisturbed. I had intended to wait until my daughter was ready to go back to school on her own accord. Her cousin didn't share the story to be funny, but rather to find a way to stop his mom's terrible behavior. He, too, was pained by her actions. Learning this, her husband realized he couldn't delay the divorce any longer and agreed to her demands in exchange for her consent. By then, she had become infamous in the neighborhood as the woman who threatened children, and no one would associate with her. Feeling cornered, she agreed to the divorce, thinking returning to her parents' home would end her nightmare. However, they turned her away at the gate, banning her from ever showing her face there again. With nowhere to go, she resorted to spending nights with random men in exchange for meals and a place to stay. When she couldn't find a man, she borrowed money from dangerous sources, accumulating a massive debt. Eventually, she disappeared. My husband and his parents decided not to file a missing persons report, reasoning that she's not a child anymore. They agree it's better this way, not willing to take care of her as she returns. Since then, my daughter has been able to go back to school on her own. Her former brother-in-law didn't move, so her cousin still attends the same school. He now says it's his turn to protect her, and they have become closer than ever. This has led to a deeper friendship between us and my former brother-in-law, as our children have brought us together. My in-laws now call both my daughter and their grandson their dear grandchildren, stepping in as their guardians when needed. With my sister-in-law gone, there's no more tension, and we have built a very trusting and reliable family relationship. I'm Sarah. I'm 40 years old and have 2 kids. I'm married to John, who's been a great support for nearly 20 years. Life has had its ups and downs, but I believe it's the people you're close to that make it easier. But then there's my brother Tom. He's 8 years younger than me and tends to make a lot of bad choices. He thinks he deserves things without working for them. Despite our mom's hopes, he hasn't really changed much even though he's 30 now. He's like a project for the family, always needing help. One Sunday, we were all at Mom's house, a place filled with memories from our childhood. We were enjoying Mom's famous roast when Tom barged in with a young woman, clearly pregnant and dressed like she was going to a party. It was a shock for everyone, especially since Tom proudly declared that she was his fiancée. Mom was shocked, dropping her fork, and Lisa, the fiancée, didn't seem bothered by the tension. Tom announced they were getting married and planned to stay with Mom until they found their own place. It worried us all. Tom had a habit of causing chaos wherever he went. After the kids were asleep, John and I discussed how Tom was taking advantage of Mom's kindness. We knew trouble was brewing, and we wondered how much damage Tom would cause before moving on. The next few days were a blur as Tom and Lisa made themselves comfortable in Mom's house. Lisa made herself at home in the living room, treating it like her own personal space. She constantly put her feet up on Mom's antique coffee table. Meanwhile, Tom just sat around on his phone, amused by things no one else found funny. Mom was busy trying to keep up with cooking and cleaning after them, but they never appreciated her efforts. It was like watching someone slowly lose energy. One evening, I found Mom in the kitchen looking worn out. I tried to tell her that she shouldn't let Tom and Lisa take advantage of her, but she insisted they were family and she couldn't turn them away. I wanted to tell her she was being used, but I kept quiet. Family relationships can be complicated, and sometimes you have to ignore the problems because you love them, even if you know it's not right. And so it began, our new normal with Tom and Lisa as ungrateful guests. The rest of us tried to keep the peace in a house that suddenly felt too crowded. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Living with Tom and Lisa turned our lives upside down. Every morning, Lisa complained loudly about her backache or her cravings, demanding breakfast as if she owned the place. She never said please or thank you. I tried to stay calm, but it was difficult. Tom was no better. He lounged around, yelling for breakfast without lifting a finger to help. Mom tried to brush off their behavior, saying they were just young, but I couldn't accept that excuse. Things only got worse as Lisa's due date approached. She left messes everywhere, spending hours on the phone gossiping. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Lisa with her feet on the coffee table again and told Tom they needed to contribute, like buying a new car for the baby's safety. Lisa dismissed me, saying she was pregnant, as if that excused her behavior. Tom defended her, and Mom begged us not to fight for the sake of the baby. But I couldn't ignore the toll it was taking on Mom. It wasn't fair to her to be running herself ragged for them. But Mom wouldn't listen. Their family, Sarah. What can we do? She'd say. The days dragged on, with Tom and Lisa disappearing for hours, leaving Mom to clean up after them. They'd return with shopping bags, laughing about their day out. One evening, I overheard them planning an extravagant wedding. "We need the best, babe. It's our day," Tom said, his arm around Lisa. She giggled, saying, "And your mom can help with the expenses, right?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I confronted them, but they brushed off my concerns, saying Mom had the money. Life in Mom's house became unbearable. Lisa gave birth to a baby boy, Alex, but instead of slowing down, it gave Tom and Lisa more excuses. One morning, I found Mom washing a mountain of dishes, while Lisa lounged on the sofa with Alex and Tom played on his phone. I asked Mom why she was doing all the work, and she just sighed, saying Lisa needed to rest, and Tom was busy. Lisa snapped at me, saying she had just had a baby and wasn't supposed to stress herself. Tom didn't even bother looking up, dismissing me. I couldn't believe their attitude. Mom tried to calm me down, but I was fed up. I told them it wasn't okay for Mom to be their servant. But they didn't care. They'd leave Mom to take care of Alex for hours and come back bragging about their shopping deals. One day, I found a receipt on the table for a designer dress that Lisa had bought, costing more than what most people make in a week. I confronted Tom and asked where they got the money for it, and why Mom was paying for their lifestyle. Tom shrugged, saying Mom was their mom and she wanted to help. I was furious, telling them they were bleeding her dry. Lisa chimed in, smirking, saying if Mom was willing, why not? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to talk to Mom alone. I told her she couldn't keep giving them money because they were using her. Mom shook her head, saying she couldn't abandon them, especially not with Alex. I tried to reason with her, but they weren't even trying to be responsible. Tom wasn't looking for a job, and Lisa was spending Mom's money recklessly. Mom looked away, whispering that she knew, but they were her children and she had to help them. I felt helpless watching my family fall apart. Tom and Lisa were draining everything and giving nothing back, and Mom was too kind to see it. I didn't know how much more I could take. The breaking point was near, and I feared what would happen when we finally reached it. Things took a turn for the worse when Mom suddenly fell ill. It happened so fast. One day she was her usual self, and the next she was bedridden, looking frail and weak. I was by her bedside, holding her hand, telling her she would get through this. She smiled tiredly, saying she was just worn out. Tom and Lisa were nowhere to be seen, probably out spending more of Mom's money. I couldn't hide my anger anymore. I asked Mom where they were and why they weren't helping. Mom's eyes were sad as she said they had their own lives and not to be too hard on them. But I couldn't let it go. They were living off Mom, and now when she needed them the most, they were absent. Mom passed away quietly one night, with me by her side. Tom and Lisa were out, probably having the time of their lives, oblivious to the tragedy at home. The funeral was a blur. Tom and Lisa arrived looking like they were going to a party, not mourning a loss. Lisa's dress was flashy and inappropriate, even for a funeral. People murmured, and John squeezed my hand, trying to offer comfort. After the service, Tom pulled me aside. "Sarah, we need to talk about Mom's will." I was still in shock from losing Mom. "Now, can't this wait, Tom?" I asked, but he was insistent. "No, it can't. I know she left the house to me. We need to sort this out." I couldn't believe his audacity. "Tom, Mom just died. Can't you show a little respect?" But he was relentless. "This is important, Sarah. I'm her son. I deserve it." The day after the funeral, I went to Mom's house to start sorting through her things. But when I got there, Lisa answered the door with a smug look. "What do you want, Sarah?" she sneered. I was taken aback. "I came to collect some of Mom's things." Lisa laughed harshly. "Oh, you didn't hear? This is our house now. Tom got everything." Tom appeared behind her, grinning. "Yeah, Sarah, Mom changed her will. The house, the money, it's all mine." I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. "You're lying. Mom would never do that." Tom shrugged. "Believe what you want, but the will is clear. This is my house now." I stood there on the doorstep of the house I grew up in, feeling like a stranger. The realization hit me hard. Not only had I lost my mother, but now I was losing my childhood home to my greedy brother and his manipulative wife. As I walked away, I knew this wasn't the end. I had to fight back for Mom, for my family, and for what was right. But little did I know, the battle ahead would be tougher than anything I'd faced before. I was a bundle of nerves as I walked into the notary's office. The whole situation felt like a bad dream. Losing Mom was hard enough, but fighting with Tom over her was something I never imagined. The notary, Mr. Jacobs, was an old family friend. He looked up as I entered, his face somber. "Sarah, I'm sorry for your loss. Let's get straight to the matter at hand," he said. I nodded, trying to steady my voice. "Mr. Jacobs, Tom says Mom left everything to him. That can't be true." Mr. Jacobs shuffled some papers. "Well, let's see what the will says." Just then, Tom and Lisa walked in, all smugness and arrogance. Lisa gave me a triumphant smirk, ready to lose Sarah. I ignored her, focusing on Mr. Jacobs. He cleared his throat and began reading the will. My heart was pounding in my chest as he read. "And to my son Tom, I leave." I braced myself for the worst, but then Mr. Jacobs said something that made my heart leap. The sum of $5,000. Tom's face fell. "What? That's it?" Mr. Jacobs continued. "And to my daughter Sarah, I leave the family home and the remainder of my estate." I couldn't believe it. Relief and disbelief washed over me. Lisa was furious. "That's impossible. She promised us the house." Mr. Jacobs looked at them sternly. "There's more. It appears your mother made this last will a month ago after expressing concerns about undue pressure from certain family members." Tom was red with anger. "She wanted me to have the house." I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. "Mom knew what you were doing, Tom. She knew you were using her." Tom turned to me, his eyes blazing. "You did this. You turned her against me." Lisa chimed in, her voice shrill. "We'll contest this. We'll get a lawyer." Mr. Jacobs raised an eyebrow. "You're free to do so. But be aware, if it's found that there was any coercion involved in the previous will, there could be legal consequences." Tom and Lisa looked at each other, their confidence wavering. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. "Mom saw through your greed. She made sure her last wishes were respected." Tom stormed out, cursing under his breath, with Lisa trailing behind him. I stayed back, thanking Mr. Jacobs. As I left the office, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness for losing Mom, relief that her last wishes were honored, and lingering anger at Tom and Lisa's audacity. It was a regular afternoon when Tom stormed into the house, his face red with anger and disbelief. "100,000 for you and just a measly $5,000 for me? How is that fair, Sarah?" I was sorting through some of Mom's papers. His outburst made me pause. "Tom, that's what Mom decided. You know she always had her reasons." He slammed his hand on the table, making me jump. "Reasons? What reasons could she possibly have to screw me over like this?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "Maybe because you and Lisa have been bleeding her dry for years," I said. Tom's face contorted with rage. "That's what we deserve, that money." That's when I found it, tucked away in a drawer, a letter from Mom. Her handwriting was unmistakable. I pulled it out and started reading. Tom's eyes were fixed on me, a mix of curiosity and fear. "What's that?" he asked. "It's from Mom," I said, my voice steady. "She explains everything here." The letter laid it out in black and white. Mom had originally set aside $100,000 each for Tom and me, but as Tom and Lisa's demands for money grew, she started deducting from his share. I looked up at Tom, his face a picture of shock. By the time she wrote her last will, you'd already taken $95,000, Tom. There was only $5,000 left. Tom staggered back as if he'd been physically hit. "No, that can't be true," he muttered. I felt the surge of anger. "It's all here, Tom. Every cent you and Lisa took, it came out of your inheritance." He looked lost, his eyes darting around the room. "But I didn't know," he whispered. "That's the problem, Tom. You never knew or cared to know." I snapped, my patience wearing thin. He slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "What have I done, Sarah?" I put the letter down, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. "You've only got yourself to blame, Tom. You chose this path." Tom left the house that day a broken man. I watched him go, feeling a sense of justice, but also a deep sadness. Our family was torn apart not just by grief, but by greed and ignorance. The house, once a battleground of family feuds, was now eerily quiet. Tom and Lisa had left, cutting off all contact with me. It was a relief and a curse, leaving me to wrestle with the aftermath of their chaos. As I sat in the living room, staring at the walls that had witnessed so much, my friend Jenna called. "Sarah, have you heard about Tom?" she asked. I braced myself. "No, what now?" Jenna hesitated. "He's been spotted around town looking for jobs, and Lisa, she's been seen with different men, flaunting around like she's single. My heart sank. And Alex, their son? I asked. No sign of him, Sarah. It's like they've forgotten they have a child. I slammed my fist on the table, fury boiling inside me. They're irresponsible, selfish. They don't deserve a child. Jenna tried to calm me. Sarah, maybe there's something you can do. Her words sparked an idea. You're right, I said. I'll fight for Alex. He shouldn't suffer because of them. The next day, I met with a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Rivera. I explained everything, my voice trembling with determination. So you want to pursue custody of your nephew? Miss Rivera asked, her eyes sharp. I nodded firmly. Yes, he's in a toxic environment. I want to give him a better life. Miss Rivera leaned forward. It won't be easy, Sarah. But if you're ready to fight, I'm with you. I felt a surge of resolve. I'm ready, whatever it takes. The legal battle that followed was tough. Tom and Lisa were unpredictable, sometimes cooperative, sometimes hostile, but I didn't back down. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, John wrapped his arms around me. You're doing the right thing, Sarah. It's hard, but right. I leaned into his embrace, exhausted but hopeful. I just want Alex to be safe, to have a family that cares. The day the judge granted me temporary custody of Alex was bittersweet. He was a sweet boy, confused and scared, but he slowly opened up to us. Emily and Max adored him, and he brought a new kind of joy into our home. Tom's reaction was a mix of anger and defeat. You've taken everything from me, Sarah, he said. I faced him, my voice unwavering. I'm protecting Alex, something you should have done. As Tom stormed off, I realized our relationship might never be repaired, but this wasn't about us. It was about a little boy who needed a stable home life. With Alex, there were challenges, but also laughter and love. He was becoming a part of our family, and I was determined to make it permanent. Looking back, I knew I'd made the right decision. It was time for new beginnings for all of us, a chance to heal, to grow, and to build a future filled with love and stability. That was the legacy I wanted to leave, a stark contrast to the selfishness and greed that had once threatened to tear us apart. The house, once a reminder of familial discord, was now filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet. Alex had become a part of our lives, his presence a constant source of joy and wonder. One evening, as we were tucking him into bed, he looked up at me with those big innocent eyes. Aunt Sarah, am I going to stay here forever? I smoothed his hair, my heart swelling. Yes, Alex, you're part of our family now. He smiled, his tiny hand gripping mine. I like it here. Emily and Max are fun. I kissed his forehead. We love having you here, sweetie. As I walked out of his room, John was waiting, a proud smile on his face. He's really settling in, isn't he? I nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment. He is. We're giving him the life he deserves. The next day, I received a call from Miss Rivera. Sarah, it's official. The court has granted you full custody of Alex. I nearly dropped the phone, tears of happiness welling up. Thank you, Miss Rivera. Thank you for everything. After hanging up, I shared the news with the family. Emily and Max cheered, hugging Alex in a group embrace. Even John had tears in his eyes. We're a family, John said, his voice choked with emotion. A real, complete family. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but we had come out stronger. In the months that followed, Alex blossomed. He was no longer the timid boy we first met. He was confident, happy, and loved. One day, while we were all in the garden, Alex came running up to me, a dandelion in his hand. Look, Aunt Sarah, I made a wish. I crouched down to his level. And what did you wish for? He grinned, his eyes sparkling. I wished we'd all be together forever. I hugged him tight. That's the best wish, Alex, and it's come true. As I looked around at my family, I felt a deep sense of peace. We had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. Our future was filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. This was our story, a testament to the strength of family and the power of love. It was a future of hope, and we were ready to embrace it with open arms.